All right, just a short recap. In the general, you can throw in an event name, mode between user and team, and then coming up to the administration tab. So you obviously need to create an administrator. This will be for you so that you can change settings, go see who's getting scores, that kind of stuff. So in this instance, we're going to go ahead and add a username. Just add my own in here. You can put in an email address for yourself to log in, and then some kind of password. And turn off the newsletter. Style. So you can do a lot of branding with this, which is kind of slick. So by default, there's not a whole lot of branding, but you can add your school logo if you want to it, your class logo, a banner, small icons and stuff. On the theme, you could stick with the core or even an older theme. If you purchased one of those themes, you could even do that as well, and change colors if you want a default color. So we're not going to really play too much with that here. On the date and time, you have the ability to set a start date and an end date. Now, you don't have to set those, but what that would allow you to do is not allow people to register in your system and be able to log in until a date starts. So if we say the CTF opens at 1 o'clock, we could set that start time here, and then students wouldn't be able to register for an account and get logged in until 1 o'clock. And obviously an end date is just that. It's a way to shut down the CTF so they can't submit any more answers. That way you can figure out who's got their final scores. On the integration side, it looks like they recently changed this. So you have the ability to set them up with the cyber or the major cyber league integration. Never really used this myself. It's just another event tracker, but like I said, it's kind of dead. There is the CTF time, which is more relevant out there. And then social shares, whether or not you want to allow them to post their final scores on their social media. So I'm going to just disable that for the time being here. All right. So by default, you're going to see a screen like this. This is kind of the welcome screen that they're going to see when they log in. Up here across the top, you're going to see this admin panel and stuff. Normally, you wouldn't see admin panel. So if we just log out, you would see these options up here. We click on users. You're not going to be able to see anything until these start to populate. And because we made this visible, you can actually see this list. Same way on scoreboard, and the challenges themselves, you'll notice, is behind a login screen. So they'll be forced to log in there. They can go ahead and register, and you can register in this fashion. Easy sign up. Now, we had this set up on the email address so that they would have to verify that email address if we left that enabled. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and log in. It's just a local system. I was afraid I would do that. Okay. So once I get logged in, I could see the challenges as a person. And then as the administrator, we can go in and take a look at the admin panel. And so on the admin panel, this lets us see all the different users that are logged in, the IP addresses that they may have came from, different solve counts, lots of good statistics if you're running one of these, and the categories that people have solved and not solved. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. Up here at the top, you'll notice there's some changes. So you have notifications. This is a way for you to do a push notification for people that have this up. So if I was to send one, there would be an alert that pops up here on the screen. So if you need to make everybody that's playing the CTF aware that maybe a system went down or we're breaking for lunch, something like that, you could send those announcements out and go ahead and hit submit, and it would send it out to everybody's screen. The pages section is what allows you to customize what the pages would look like. So by default, you have this index page. And this is the main page that they see when they first come to your CTF, this one here. So you can customize that all you want. Just come in here to all your pages, index, and then you can use HTML. You can do it in Markdown, etc. One note is that you'll notice that this is currently in HTML, but the format is set to Markdown. So if you hit save or make changes, it's going to break the page and make it look really goofy. You just need to adjust this setting to HTML, plug in whatever HTML you want down here, and you should be good to go. If you're pointing out the logos and stuff, obviously you can do local logos. What's also nice is if you look at the page variables, if I want to inject, the CTF name into the page and the start time, end time, so that it's not actual text, that it's pulling those variables from the system, I could inject that in such a way that we would see that. So for example, this little script here will calculate how long it is to it and have a little countdown screen like this on there. Simple ways to kind of build that stuff in. Typically, I just have it on the main challenge that says, hey, register here, or look on Blackboard for the registration code, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But you can also build out other pages. So a good example of that, like I used in my class this fall. So this was the first landing page that they came to. And if you have a keen eye, you'll notice ChatGPT did this because I certainly didn't come up with these little logos. But I told it what I had, and then it went ahead and generated the HTML for me so I could do this rather quickly and get it up and going. So I had this main one here, and then I created a whole VM section. Now you had to be logged in for that. Let's log in so I can show you what that might look like. And so here is where they would gather information about the individual VMs or the individual challenges they would have to accomplish. So they could go out to that VM and then they would have a bunch of information out here. If we were to look at the admin side and the pages, you can see how that's broke down. So I just have additional pages here. I required them to be logged in order to see those and that they're hidden. So if you don't set those to hidden, you will see them start to show up as links across the site here. In this case, the only one I wanted to show up was VM info. And then when they went to VM1, it would take them there. It wasn't hidden in that regard. It just doesn't show up in the menu up at the top of the screen. And then you can have them as draft format or in published format. So in this case, we're not going to make much changes here. We're just going to hit save and let it go ahead. You can make comments down here. So if you're working with another instructor or something on this, or you want to make notes to yourself, hey, I made changes here for this purpose, you can set up those comments here. Next one over is users. This is how you could manually add users to the system. So if you don't want people to be able to register, you want to create them by hand, you could certainly do that on this side. If you would like to have them register, we're going to skip over to the config option up here at the top. And this is where you can go back and make those changes from that initial setup. You can adjust logos and themes and default languages, things like that. You could adjust your visibility, whether you want those like we talked about before. Account-wise, you could do an email domain list. So again, this is how I kind of restrict it down. If I'm putting one on for my students, I may restrict that down to @mail.fhsu.edu. You could also have a allow and a block list. So, whitelist, blacklist. Minimum password that you want your users to have, whether or not they're going to verify those emails. And then you could also set a max number of user accounts for your CTF as well. And whether or not you're going to allow them to change their names in here. Yes, you would be able to upload a CSV of accounts, and we'll get to that here in just a second. Good question. On the scoreboard brackets, you could set up extra things so that you could see, just depends on what you want. Custom fields, if you end up needing that. The main one I use is this registration code. So I would create an account here. So let's say something like WWC2025. And so if they're going to sign up for mine and I turn on registration, they would have to enter in that code. So an example of that would look like setting that there, coming out here to the main website and then logging out. You'll notice when I go to register, it now has this registration code section. And that way you don't get a bunch of people on the internet. So a lot of times I'll put that code on flyers or, if I'm holding this locally at a conference, and that code would allow them to go ahead and log in. Oh, I know setting that silly password was going to bite me. There we go. All right, so going back to config, you also have the challenges, and this is whether or not you want to make some adjustments there. So you could set a max number of attempts, whether they're going to get locked out of that question, or maybe you want to set a timeout where they just can't give any more suggestions or answers there for a period of time. Little bitty setting, and we'll talk more depth about challenges here in a little bit. You have the backup and import. And so this would be a way for you, when everything's done, you can export, and it basically creates a zip file with all your different settings and everything else that you might want. And that allows you to move it over to a different instance. So I could have this instance, for example, I could come to this one for my class, go to the config and down to export, and I could do an export and a backup copy. I do that at the end of the competition, so I have all the data. And if I ever want to go back and see what they did, I just need to stand up a quick instance of CTFD, import that in through the zip file here, and all that entire CTF will be back up to date and ready to go. So pretty slick to be able to use that one. You do have the ability to download information as CSV files, which means you can also import it as CSV files. So you were asking about a CSV import. You can definitely do it in that realm. This challenge import is also one that we're going to play with here in a little bit. So I'll show you how to handwrite challenges, or maybe you want to use a AI in order to help you write some of these questions out. We can do that both ways. On the security and sanitize, this you definitely want to do and enable. What that does is just make sure that any HTML content that comes up or anything else is secure, meaning that we don't have the option for SQL injections. Your legal and your robots, if you want to set terms of service and whether or not you're going to allow things to index your website. And the rest of these is pretty good. The last one here is whether you want to change these particular actions. It will delete all the submissions and the records if you do it. And then the very last one is that you just want to completely blow it away. And maybe you just want to blow away accounts, and then that way they start up the registration again, or the submissions, the pages, and the notes. So really easy to reset everything up. All right. So the big one here to know is the export. And so when you get done playing today, I encourage you to export that as a zip file. Again, if you're on the NetLab system, you can email that to yourself. There's internet on the inside. In which case you could then load it back up on your machine later and continue playing and setting up questions. Anybody have any questions with what I've covered so far?
I had a question. How heavy is this on a regular server? Like, is it a very lightweight to run on a server?
Yeah, it's very lightweight. I often run it on laptops. I just show up in the room, fire it up in a Docker container, and away I go.
Okay, and also, can this be run from AWS or something like that?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
No.
So, like for example, this one I run for my class. This is running on it's a DigitalOcean droplet, which is the equivalent of like a AWS or any of the other ones you want to use. But as instructors, we actually can get some pretty good credit at AWS or Google Cloud. And so you could use that to host one of these. So what you would do there is get an instance, get Docker installed, and then you could just run that one command. Now this, because you're running it public like that, I would encourage you to use the Docker Compose file because it's going to be a little more robust then.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And so on my side, what this is actually running on is I have a Portainer, which is kind of an overall system of Docker containers that you're running for public use. And I run that as a way of hosting stuff for the cloud. And that's where you see our Docker stuff that we've done in here today. My CTFs, all that kind of stuff is right out there for that. That's far beyond the scope of what we can do in this class. But very simply, you can start an Amazon container, get Docker on it, run that Docker Compose command, and then import your zip. So, all right, great questions. So let's see here. On this side, you will see, again, your users we talked about. You can see the students. Go back to the example one here. On the users, we could add them in manually, or you can have them register. Challenges is where you're going to spend most of your time. So challenges is where the student's going to have some activity. On this example one I showed you, this is what they would see for challenges, where I had this quiz section at the top, and I had it set up in such a way that they have to answer the first one before they see the second one or the third one, however many I have in there. Down below, they just see all of those challenges, and those are VM challenges where they could go through. So you can set this up in any fashion you want. So we're just going to create a new challenge up here. And you have two options. They can either be a standard challenge or dynamic. And what the difference is dynamic, as people get answers, it's going to lower the point value overall. So you just determine what type of game type that you want there. On a standard one, you set it for, say, 100 points. And if they get it right, they would get 100 points added to their system. If they use hints, they can burn some of those points. So a lot of times you can hand out a couple free points for them to get started. And then you may set that up as a grade. So that's kind of how I do it is I'll take the total points and subtract, 90, whatever 90% is, and then that's the grade to get an A. And that way, if they burn a few points, it doesn't hurt their grade. But if they burn too many of them, it will bump them down to a lower grade. So, and you don't have to use hints. You don't have that option. So on a challenge name here, this is the challenge that they're going to see like this here. So Network Recon 1. We could do something like that. If we stick with the theme of what we've done in this class, which was kind of my goal here to follow along with. So if we go back to our foundations, we could do a little something like, let's call it, foundations is a good start, right? So we have foundations. And this would be foundations 1. You could set up your individual categories, whatever you want to name them. It's just a way to group everything together. So in this case, we're going to just call this foundations as a lowercase. And whatever message we want to give for that, if we choose to give a message. There may not be one. So this would be something like, what is 2 plus 2 for the simple sake of what we're doing here. And we'll hit create. All right. Then we need to create a flag, and this is usually the way the student's going to answer whatever your question was in your challenge. So you can have a couple different formats here. The global standard is that it's flag something, right? So if the answer was 2, they would have to answer in this format. You don't have to. You can just have it as a straight 2 if you wanted to. In this case, the answer should be 4, right? That's not a problem. You can set the case sensitivity. I encourage you to probably use case insensitive, otherwise you're going to get students really upset. I know that from experience. Now, the only time I don't allow case insensitivity is say it is a Linux command or something that they have to type in. Then we absolutely want it to be case sensitive because it's case sensitive in Linux. So it varies on the questions as to whether we want to do sensitive or insensitive. If you have them answer in that standard flag format, like you buried that flag in a virtual machine and they have to figure out what it is, that's a good idea to put this like on the cover page to say, hey, when you submit answers, they should always be in this format. So for example, if you come out here to my VM info and on VM1, you will see that this is the flag format that they will find on the virtual machines. And therefore, they should type in this entire format exactly as they see it. They would copy and paste that out of the virtual machine and paste that right into here or type it in exactly that way. You also have the ability to submit files with your challenge. So we talked about PCAT challenges. This would be a great way to do challenges on Wireshark. So you could write a challenge over here instead of 2 plus 2, say what was the timestamp of the FTP when the user got logged in. In which case you could submit a PCAT file. They would have to download the file, load it up in Wireshark, scan through it to figure out when the FTP packets are, then find out when the user was actually successful, and copy and paste that timestamp as your flag up above. So a couple different ways that you can build these out. You can set this to either hidden or visible to the user. Most of the time you're going to want it visible. You want them to actually do it. But say you have a problem with that challenge and you just don't want to expose it, you could set it to hidden so that you don't have to actually delete it. You can come back and fix it later. Writing these from experience, every now and then you'll get one that's not quite right, and it's easier just to make it hidden and go forward with the CTF versus trying to delete it out of there. So once we have it visible, we can go ahead and hit finish. And that takes you to this screen here. So this is where we can make even more tweaks to this particular challenge if we wanted to. So over here on the left, we have our files, and you can continue to upload multiple files if you need be. We could set more than one flag. So say, for example, you want to take the answer of 4, right? That was our question. We may do something like that. We may want to create a separate one, and this would just be a static one with the answer of 4 being case insensitive, so that either one of these ways of them typing in an answer, they would be able to get accepted in that fashion. You also have a solution. So if you want to give them the final word, like if they failed out or something, you could write up some HTML or Markdown, however you want to do it, and give them a solution on how to figure out that answer. So some steps or something like that. And you can control whether or not they get it. So when they solve it, you could give them the solution, or maybe you want to give them the visible and you're telling them how to go get that answer. There's lots and lots of flexibility in the platform. Under topics, this is so you could kind of tag it with different topic IDs, same way with tags themselves. This just makes it easier to sort and filter things later if you choose to do so. Hints, I've talked about that a little bit. So a lot of times, like on this 2 plus 2, you may want to give them a hint. Say it was something significantly harder, right? We could give them a title for that, and you could say, this is what it would be displayed before they unlock the hint. So you could just call this hint 1. And then you could actually give the hint here, set a cost to it. So maybe 20 in that case. And then you could, in some cases, you could set requirements where they would have to do so much before they could unlock this hint. So we'd hit submit. And then under requirements, we could say behavior, if not unlocked, we could say either hidden or anonymized. And then next allows us to do that chain that I talked about before. So if we created another challenge here, for example, I'll just show you the back end of this one. And I have Network Recon 2. Under next, it says this is the next challenge that it would recommend they solve after that. But you can also in requirements say you must have completed Network 1 in order to get access to Network Challenge 2. So that allows you to do that challenge board in that fashion. Or maybe you just want to display them all. They're, again, extremely flexible. Over here, you can adjust that message and what that may be. Additional settings. The biggest thing would be whether you wanted static. Sometimes you can do logarithmic. And over here on your answers, flags, when you create a flag through here, you can also do it in a regex fashion. So say you wanted to write a regular expression where, it just has to match some piece of it. And so if they type in something really long, but we're clearly looking for the word, this is a flag in there, you could write a regular expression in this format. I won't cover regex in great detail. Those have ever written it or done it. It's not fun. You could spend a lifetime doing regex. That is where ChatGPT and there's plenty of other regex tools online that are your friend for this kind of answers. All right. The more time you spend setting this up and really playing with this when you go, the better user experience your students will have. So a great example there, and I'll show you here in a little bit. These were set up as static answers, right? So it's only going to accept 4 or it's going to accept 4 in this format. If I go to these challenges I created here for this network recon, for example, it says what pattern indicates an IDS evasive ACK scan. In this case, the answer is ACK, right? Well, if they have like a multi-sentence one, so let me go to a much larger challenge here. So what TCP header feature is best for fingerprinting custom firewalls? You have timestamps was the original answer. Well, I had students putting in timestamp. And, that's an acceptable one. Actually, it was timestamps, and they were typing in the plural version. I could come in and just adjust this to be a regex, and so therefore I wouldn't have to have multiple entries in here. But you should have variants like this in there. It makes for a much better user experience if you do. Otherwise, they get super frustrated spinning in a bunch of submissions. And we'll talk about submissions here in a little bit. All right, so we got our little flag here. You can also set max attempts. So if you are only going to let them have 4 attempts per answer or 3 attempts, then at that point, they can no longer answer that question. So, all right, so if we go back to our challenges board, we have our first one in there. And we have our different categories, so that way we can sort, filter these out. If we go back and look at it from a student view, it would look something like this. So we have a category of foundations, and we labeled this Foundations 1. There's several different ways to set this stuff up. If this was My Master Challenge, and then you had a Wireshark one here, and maybe a lottery answer over here, whatever else. This is all Jeopardy style at this point. And Jeopardy just kind of refers to the fact that you're asking them a question. It looks like this: what is 2 plus 2? If I wanted to buy the hint, I could go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I just need to enter in an answer. So if I say 3, you'll notice I get it incorrect. If I do a 4, I get it correct and it marks it green. Right? And if you come up here on the solves, you can see how many times it's been solved. So if we refresh, you would see that. Now, I'm logged in as the administrator, so that number isn't going to change. But as students start to solve it, they can start to see how many students have actually solved it. From an admin side, we can also see that. So if we go back to that challenge, specifically, we can look at the correct submissions, so all the students that answered it correctly. We can also look at the ratings on it. Did people give this a 4-star challenge, whatever you want. It's a great way to get some feedback to adjust those. And then you could obviously delete that challenge if you choose to. Which takes us over to submissions. So you can see everything in terms of answers that people have submitted. So you can see my submission of 3 and 4. You can filter by correct and incorrect submissions. So I, as an instructor, typically I'm worried about the incorrect submissions, right? So if my students are complaining, man, I just can't get this answer, I can't figure it out, I can come into the incorrect ones and see what they've been typing in. And maybe I decide, hey, you should go ahead and get credit for that one. I can go in and manually give them credit for that particular submission. So for example, I could click on this one here and I could give them the mark and I could say, hey, that's actually correct, and they get their points for it. What's also good there is if you start to see a bunch of people typing in the same thing, but it's just not quite right, maybe you should go into your challenge and add in another flag answer that would make sense in that regard. So maybe a regex or something like that. That's the reason I keep copies of old CTFs, because if I find out, look, students were typing it, they just didn't have exactly what I had in there. I should build a regex that would work. I can take all those possible combinations they did, copy and paste that into ChatGPT and say, hey, build me a regex that would give me these answers to work as acceptable. And it will build you a regex. You don't have to be a regex wizard. Use the tools that are available to you for that. All right, so that's most of the features in there. And again, challenges have all sorts of different ways that you can do stuff. You'll notice on this initial one, when I set it up, there is no option of setting up, like here's the decay. So if I do a dynamic one, we could say the initial value is 100, but every time somebody answers, we're going to drop that decay by 20 points. So, and by the time you hit a minimum of 10 points, meaning it'll keep going down, in this case, it should be 20, right? So the first 4 times people answer it, it's going to keep getting lower and lower worth value. And then at the very bottom, no matter what, you're always going to get 20 points for it. So I'll pause there. Does anybody have any questions? I know that's a lot in a little bit, but what do you guys think about using something like this in the classroom as a gamification way of letting them challenge themselves?
I'm all for it.
Yeah, it seems like it's complicated, but I assure you, once you get to playing with it, it's really not that bad. The hardest part is coming up with the questions and the challenges, right? So if you're doing a Jeopardy style one, what's great is you could take, like, say, my content that came out of here and do it to, like, say, ChatGPT. So for example, let's just see what it can do. We'll come out here and go to the workshop and Cyber for Beginners, and let's copy that. And then let's go ahead and pull up trusty dusty ChatGPT. Let's just start a new chat. And we could do a web search. And basically, we don't even have to do that, actually. We're just going to tell it to use it. So I have a training website at, like that. I want to create a CTFD challenges for all of the days using the topics as categories. All right. Now I can hit enter here, and we're going to do that just for the sake, if I could actually spell correctly. And let's see what it comes back with.
You ever tried this in Notebook LM?
You could do the same. Yep. If you fed it a bunch of documents and that. Now, Notebook LM isn't going to be able to generate this kind of stuff directly because it's kind of it's only going to work with the material you have. So I could upload PDFs into here or something like that, but I have not directly used it in Notebook LM. I'd be curious. So what's cool is it's going to tell you what you should do for these. So for example, these should be your categories. Maybe 4 to 6 challenges per one, difficulty of easy to very easy to easy, range of points. And of course you can adjust this the way you want, right? And this is great. So we have challenge 1, what is a flag, kind of a warm-up thing. We could do a description that this is what a flag will look like, and the flag is welcome to the CTF, and they get 50 points to start out. Then we can see the question about our CIA triad, right? What's the principle that ensures data is not altered? Integrity. And so in this case, we're telling them we want it to answer in this format. So they would always put integrity inside the flag format. Don't have to do it that way. That's just the standard. And you can see they're making these points kind of step up as they go. So this is great, but does anybody see the problem with this? All right, so I'm lazy and I don't want to have to copy and paste all that. Right?
I was fixing to say copy and paste.
Yeah, I mean, copy and paste works great. At least I didn't have to come up with the topic, or I could at least tweak it, use it for, what it is. And what's great about things like ChatGPT is they're going to be like, hey, would you like me to generate some things like flags and hints and all this other kind of stuff? And it can do some of it, but what I've found is you really need to give it context, right? Just like all AI LLMs, you need to give it as much context as possible. And so if we come back into our challenge here on the admin and the config and the import, it would be really nice if we could just import a CSV with all the stuff in it that it needs. So if we go to our challenges, right? And if this part up here, it says instructions and CSV templates. That sounds like a good place. So let's scroll down and we can see a team user template. So you asked earlier how we could upload a bunch of users. There's a template for that. We are more interested in this challenges using the challenges CSV one. So let's download that. And let's just take a look at what that would look like. And so what we end up with are these columns at the top, the name of it, whatever the description is. This will be like what is 2 + 2 kind of thing. Whatever category we want it in, our values, whether we're going to use standard or dynamic, whether it is currently hidden or visible, how many attempts. And then the flags, you'll notice the flags are actually set up in a way that you would see a dictionary for each one. So for example, if we wanted hints in there, so if we expand this out a little bit so you can see each one, we can see that there's 3 flags for this, and those are the answers, flag 1, flag 2, flag 3. We can have tags in there. We're not really too concerned with that. Hints we can see, and then the way the hints work is whether or not they're going to set a value for those. All right. So hint 1, and then what's the value there? There's a couple other tweaks you can do, but this is a fairly good place to get started. So I'm going to close this and not save any of those little adjustments I made. Let's go back to our ChatGPT here, and I'm going to go ahead and add that file that we just got as a CSV. And let's give it some context. So we can say, here is an example of the CSV import for challenges. You must stick with the column headings and fill out appropriate. All right. So it's important that you give this after having generated multiple in this fashion. You want to say, hey, you have to stick to those exact headings and that template. A lot of times it's not really hallucinating, it's just generating a CSV that didn't really take all the restrictions into account. We may say something like, there should be no hints on any challenge. Challenges should escalate in points as you suggested. Let's see here. Please generate any additional flags per question where a student might have an alternate answer, such as 4 and 4, like that. And if we look at that template one more time, just to make sure I'm not missing anything, we'll tell it that we want all the types to be standard. That way we're not dealing with dynamic stuff at this point. And we eliminated hints for the time being. So the rest of this all looks pretty good. All should be of type standard. Please generate at least 10 questions per category. All right, let's see what it comes back with. So whatever reason, it didn't like that CSV that I uploaded. Let's try that again. I don't know why I can't take a CSV for some reason, but we'll go ahead and just follow the directions it's looking for. So let's do this. And we're just going to copy and paste that right into here. Now, instead of copying and pasting that in, the better thing would have been to bringing it up in a just notepad. So it actually was in a CSV format like this. But like I said, sometimes it'll randomly kick out these different variables. And if this doesn't match exactly what we told it to do up there, then we need to tell it, hey, please follow directions and stick within the session there. So this is getting close here. You'll notice that the CSV is essentially broken down and given us 10 questions and then does a break and then 10 for the second day. So this is looking good. I'm not really happy with the name of some of these as it's giving the answer away, but we guess we set it at the easy level, right? So that's all right. I'm definitely not used to the free version. It's just taking a while to generate. All right, does anybody see some of the problems that we're seeing here? Anything look really weird here?
Yeah, you're doing 4 and 5.
Yeah, right. We didn't spend no days 4 and 5. So it's definitely not sticking to the website that we told it to stick with. So we may want to go back and edit some of these or revise some of these, that kind of thing. I'd encourage you then at this point to save this file out. So if you copy this, let's just create a new tab here. And you may want to do this in Excel so you can kind of really see your columns. So let's do that at this point. Let's just save it. Make sure we save that as a CSV. All right, that looks good. Let's close that down. And I got this Excel sheet. So let's make sure everything's lining up the way we would expect. And this isn't bad, right? So there's some good ones in here. There's some things I would have liked to have seen a little better. But for the most part, this isn't a bad start to get us going. I would probably have it trim down the names and just say day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, because things like this, what's the secure version of HTTPS? We probably don't want to have day 3 HTTPS. That doesn't make much sense, right? But that's easy enough for us to fix in here, or we could go back and do it with the AI. In this case, I'm just going to fix it in here. Let's go back and do, oh, got the wrong one there. There we go. Ah. And day 5. Okay, so this moderately looks fairly decent. Our flags look like something that makes a little bit of sense, especially when we're starting to look at like Linux commands and things like that. Those are good ones to give challenges over. We can also see that these points progressively get worth more and more points, so that's looking like we want it to. This isn't bad, and there's no hints currently, which is what we asked for, right? So let's go ahead and save this one. And let's go to our system here. We will choose to import that like that. And if all goes well, this will not give errors like this, right? So max attempts is not a valid integer. Value is not a valid integer. Line 11, 12, I'm sorry, 11, 22, 33, 30. I'm guessing in that first column of each one of those, it has some kind of entry. So let's go look again.
Jason, does it have to be in the Excel format to upload it?
It needs to be in CSV format. So not necessarily Excel, just CSV. Just a little easier to look at it on this side. So if we go and look at those columns, we see 11, 12, etc. on those. These max attempts, we definitely just don't need it, is what we want to just set it as empty. And that should get rid of that issue. We could also get rid of these extra lines here just to make sure we're not having any issues. Although I've never really had that be a real problem. There again, don't save it as an Excel sheet. Make sure you're saving this out as a CSV. So that looks good. Let's try that upload again. Not valid integer. So it needs something in there. There we go. If it goes well, you're going to see something like that. And so what happened? Come out here to challenges, and sure enough, all of those got imported in as challenges. We can obviously go in and tweak those, but if we were to go to our main CTF and go to challenges board, we can now see all those challenges for each one of those. See the points, we could click on the question, and we could see the individual question here. So again, it's not perfect, and you can tweak your prompting to get better questions out of it. Obviously, you can generate your own questions in there, especially if you want them to where people can't use AI to answer this or something else. But it's really, really easy to spin some of these up, especially on the Jeopardy side. What I would say is on the Notebook LM type of thing, where it's really good at making those quiz questions and such, you may have a little copy and paste, but at least you could build that information out of there. I'm not there again, not familiar enough with it. If you could tell it to export that as a CSV, bring that into something like ChatGPT, and then say, make it fit this format, and add in the extra columns and stuff that needs to be in there. It could probably do that. So for each one of these, I wouldn't necessarily call this, day 3. It'd be like day 3, challenge 1, and we could accelerate that going forward, kind of thing. But really easy way to start doing these challenges going through. Again, if you wanted to do something like with a packet capture or something like that, and you wanted to give them a bunch of Wireshark captures, then you could submit those challenges and just attach a file to it. So on a standard one, we could set a value and then attach a PCAP file inside of there, and we should be able to let them do some additional challenges. What's really fun as they start going, everybody wants to see the scoreboard, right? So as you're progressing, for example, if you look at this scoreboard, students will sit there and start seeing, you can see the rate at what they're getting these answers correct. So this is over a series of days, actually, because I had it open for a long time. First couple days wasn't too bad. They got a couple answers really good, and then you can see where I was testing to see if they were paying attention and dropped all the answers in a Discord, and they took off and started finishing all the answers. So there again, it wasn't this point value that I was grading upon. It was the answers on the VM side. They needed to answer how they got to those. So even if they got the flag from me, they still had to understand the concept of where they would go to get that. So for example, on this one, they had to do a full port scan, kind of like what you guys did, figure out the total number of those that are out there, what services were there, and they had to understand what they were going to do to go to the next step of grabbing banners, try to exploit things, that kind of stuff. And there's no answers as to how to do that. They have to take the skills they learned in the class to actually go and execute that. So some good feedback there. What do you guys think of that? Do you guys think that that's something you could implement, especially with the onset of AI and some other tools to help you do it cleanly?
Yeah. Oh,
Great. And like I said, they don't have to be over the top questions. Start with some easy ones like we had there. What is HTTP? What is HTTPS? What you don't want is long open-ended answers. I strongly encourage you to use one-word answers or numbers or whatever it is. What port is HTTP run on? That kind of stuff. In the beginning, till you get used to putting on some of the challenges and all the answers that could be coming in from them. Great, Tim. That sounds great. So again, to set this up in the classroom, you can just start off with getting that CTF link. So let me just take you back to that real quick. So if you come out here to the resources and URLs, down here at the bottom, you're going to see CTFD GitHub. And if you scroll down, you got this one-liner command on how to set up a Docker container. So that's all you need to run this in the classroom or for you to set up the development of that zip file. So for example, say we're fairly happy with this particular instance for whatever reason. Obviously, we should do some more changes, but we could go to settings, in admin panel, config, and we could do an export. And this will give us our zip file that we're looking for. And then all I have to do is light up another instance like at my house or home, and I can continue working on it and then save out the final copy and then wherever I'm going to host that for the students. So you can walk in with it doesn't have to be a fancy machine, right? It just needs to run either Docker desktop, and frankly, it doesn't even have to be that big. It could run just Docker itself, and you could come in, follow the one-line command here in order to get Docker up and going, or CTFD. Do back in here and do your import. So you just come over here to the import tab. Now, when you first set that up, it'll come up to that setup page, and you just do a one-off, just dump information in. You don't have to be exactly, for example, because when you wipe it, or when you start a new one, it's always going to ask you to go through that setup procedure. So you get everything set up, no big deal. When you come into admin and config, and you import, it's going to wipe all the existing data out of there anyway. So I would just come in here and choose that import and hit import, and it will walk you through how to set all this up. It'll take a little bit, and now it's ready for me to log right back into this session. So an example of that, I would have the same logins. Everything's tied in with that user. So I can show you this part. Let's see here.
But you have to have Docker or Docker desktop.
Either one. Desktop is just handy for you to have some kind of GUI in order to know that the Docker's running. If you're good at Docker command line and you just want to run everything from the command line, you absolutely don't need Docker desktop. In other words, Docker is going to be installed on both ways. Docker desktop just gives you this GUI so you can see what's actually running at this point. Otherwise, you have to be good with Docker commands. So it would be something like Docker ls shows, or I'm sorry, Docker, see if I can get my commands here. I used to have these all memorized, and I don't use it natively like that anymore. So you could use Docker ps is going to be all those containers. That's what I did earlier. So that will list me out. Oh, if I can spell Docker correctly. So these are all the containers that are running. If I wanted to drop into the shell of one of those, for some reason I need to make a change, then I would do a Docker exec command, and I could drop into the shell. So it'd be something like Docker exec. Let's drop into that ctfd one and do it as a bin bash file. And that didn't drop me in there. What did I miss? I missed a command here.
Now, are you running Docker on Linux?
In production?
Yes.
Yeah. So that little Portainer that you saw out there, what I'm running there is Portainer is just kind of a UI for. I run it the business edition, but it's more for production use. We could easily stand this up, like I said, at Amazon or anything like that. So, well, that's a good question. Let's just try that. Which one would be of more interest? Amazon, Google?
Google for me.
Google. All right. Does most people have access to Google's cloud service, even the free one? Let me see if I can log into just a general Google account. I want to log in with my business one because that'll give me more than what you may have. Google Cloud. All right. So this would be just a basic Google Cloud, and I'm logged in with my Google account here. In terms of pricing and stuff we're looking for, we could stay within that free tier or some pretty low tiers. That shouldn't be too bad for that at all. So in the free tier, we can see we can get one of these E2 micro instances per month. That should be plenty to run this to get started. So let's test that. Let's see if that actually works. So I believe if we go up to the console, it's been a while since I've been through Google Cloud here, so bear with me. And let's do create a VM. Actually, I think you have to put a card in, don't you?
They always want your money.
Yeah. I think you have to put a card on
just to set it up, even though it's free.
Yeah, I remember that now. Sure. Yay, thanks for taking my money. All right, give me a second. See if I can do this off screen here. I thought I had one. All right, so it took it, and then I just need to enable the cloud compute just to set up that container, make sure that works. And evidently that's slow today.
Everybody's shopping.
I guess. That free tier is really free tier, right? All right, let's see if I'm just being impatient. Yep, and still trying to enable. Okay, I don't know what this project is, but that'll work. So let's see if I can recall. We want a compute engine, and we just want a, really don't even need a full-blown VM, but a VM should work for what we're doing here. And manage. I don't really need the API. Why is this? For those of you that use it, if you see me doing something silly here, there we go. That's what I want. Oh, okay. It's great for the API, but I'm not really looking for the API, right? Try that again. There we go. All right. So we obviously don't want to continue with an E2. It's going to cost us 25 bucks a month. So if I remember right, that free tier was clear down, what, E1 or something like that? Really don't care where it's being at. Let's do, where was that free tier at? There we go. Shared micro. Oh, still $7.
Maybe nothing's free anymore.
Well, I just saw it on the free, and it's that E1 tier. So whatever I'm missing here, they just need a. Let's see what the Gemini tells us what we should need, right? Oh, you know what it is. I know. At least with some of these, you usually have to have a certain location in order to get the free tier. So let's try Dallas. Close the Gemini thing. Nope, that didn't give us the option for E1 either. Usually, the default we give you that E1. Huh. Well, this is the fun of doing it live, right? It's interesting. Usually,
Good to see.
yeah, right. It's, I guess free is no longer free the way they have it. Let's see here.
If this is not free, could you do it with AWS?
Yeah, if I had a AWS login, I could probably find one here. It looks like what should have been free was this micro. I'm not sure why it's no longer free, but it's typically what it is. All right, well, let's try AWS because I haven't been there in forever. Like I said, I'm pretty stuck in DigitalOcean these days, but that doesn't mean we can't test it. Let's see here. No idea. Well, let's just create a new one, see what happens. That sounds like a good idea. All right. Just use my company one. Oh, and a name. How's that work? Okay. I evidently can't type today. All right. Oh, forgive me here. I'm just going to set up a quick account. I guess that way I can demo that. So I'm just registering with AWS for a free account, nothing fancy. See what they come back with. All right, got the account set up. I guess let's go ahead and go with the free plan. It's good enough to start. Let's see here. And they just want some general information, so I'll get that filled in. And of course, they want a credit card number.
Always want the money.
Oh my goodness, they want a cell phone number too, just to make sure they can get a hold of you, right?
Don't ever go out looking for cars and give them your cell phone number.
Right. All right. It's a simple 5-step process. Okay, we finally have a Amazon account, evidently. Perfect. So it's then again been a while since here. So even though I was certified 10 years ago, let's not focus in on that. Let's see if we can't build a simple little app here. So if we come out to my applications, these are going to be little apps, if I recall. This won't be an actual instance here. So let's skip that. What we're really looking for is building out a little instance. EC2, there we go. All right, so we want to create a little instance. If we look down here, we could do an instance from a template, and that's probably going to be the best for what you guys want to get started. We don't really have a template evidently by default, so let's just do a launch instance. Let's call this my CTFD, lack of a better term. What application do we want? So you can use whatever tier we want. I assume we could still do Ubuntu in the free tier. That works. Or even Debian. Any of these would work just fine. Whatever you're familiar with. Keep it on the 64 architecture. And instance type will stay in that free tier. That seems fine. Let's see. We could create a new key pair. Do that off screen here. I don't know that it matters because I'm going to trash all this when I'm done. So that looks good. Sure. And I'll save that down just in case. Probably not into the GitHub repository. That'd be a bad idea. All right. All right. So basic network security. There again, we talked about security in the cloud, making sure that you're only allowing certain traffic in order for it to come up. We are going to allow HTTP or HTTPS traffic. In this case, let's just do HTTP to get you up and going. Long term, we again should probably set this up behind a Nginx proxy. So I think I'll go ahead and allow both of those, and we'll end up setting up Nginx proxy as well. So this looks good here. Basic storage, we're still not in the tier of having to pay for anything from what I can tell. Anything advanced? No, we're not going to necessarily deal with anything special at this point. Okay. We have about 8 gig, which is way more than what we really need for what we're doing here. Cores wise, it looks like we get 2 vCPUs and a gig of memory. So again, plenty for what we're wanting to do from the free tier. That shouldn't be a problem. So let's go ahead and launch that code, or launch that instance rather. All right, let's take a look at the log. Looks like everything loaded up just fine. View our instances, and we can see we're up and running here. Is there any alarms? Nope, everything's good. Great. So we end up with a public IP address here and even a public DNS in order for us to get to that. If we wanted to get in, I think we can click on this instance and we could connect to it. And we could either do, let's see, we'll just use our public IP, username. That looks good. And so usually to connect in, you would either use their interface or you would need to use that SSH key that I downloaded, and you would be able to use that to connect out to that public IP. Right? But this will work for the instance we're doing. So a couple things right off the bat. Let's do a sudo apt update just to make sure we have all of our updated packages. Okay, let's do an upgrade with a -y. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep a running list of these, and I'll try to build a page on the website that'll have some of these out there. So now this would be the same process if you guys wanted to build a virtual machine out, and I would encourage you to use Ubuntu server, Debian server, whatever you're familiar with. You could use a desktop version. It's just going to use more resources. The idea behind this is to keep it as tiny as possible. So we're going to go down that path. Okay, so we've got our updates. Everything looks good. For the sake, we're going to go ahead and just reboot this. Make sure we got the latest kernels and everything ready to go. assuming we get our instance back here. There again, this has changed dramatically since the last time I was in here. So we can go ahead and close that connection, probably launch another one here so that we can actually get a new login. Great. So we're up and going. And again, we have this public IP address. This is our private side, but we can pass through our public if we want. Actually, I think that one is public. So just to make sure, what we could do is a SS TLNP-UP. There we go. So that will tell us what ports are currently open on this particular system. We can see the only thing open is going to be DNS and SSH. That's the ports that we're currently listening to on Linux. So we need to install a couple of packages. We already have our SSH, so we're good there. We're going to need to chase Docker next. So instead of just typing it out, let me take you out to the Docker page. And that way you can follow these instructions down the road. And I will copy and paste that in my notes here. So what's great is you just want to remove any conflicting packages that may be showing up there. So we just copy that one. And we can right click and paste that in as plain text. And it looks like we're all good there. We need to set up the apt repository for this. Again, we can just copy, paste right off the official documentation. Okay, that looks good. And then we want specifically this here, including the Docker Compose plugin and all the other pieces. So that's all looking good. Oh, come on now. And yes. Great. So Docker should be going. We can test that. We can make sure that it's already set up to automatically come up. So let's check our status. And we can see Docker is actively running. So we're good in that respect. If it wasn't, we could go ahead and manually start it. And then we can run this Docker command here, which is just a hello world, making sure that Docker is doing what we expect. And hello, we're good to go. So that looks good. There's really nothing else down here if you want to install it from raw packages, but it's really that simple to get Docker set up on a Linux Ubuntu instance. So now that we have that, we need to go grab our Docker file so that we have something up and running, right? So there's two things that we should do here. We have that Docker Compose that we had earlier, which we generated in ChatGPT, right? So let's go back there. Find the right one here. There we go. And you can see we created this Docker one that we wanted here, right? And I think at the end, what we really said, we tell it we wanted, there we go. Please use Nginx Proxy Manager to cover us for HTTPS. That's great. So that should be getting us good. And it notices all this data and such in here. Let me just check on how it's having it set up. Okay, so this particular one is using local directories in order to store the information. And we really don't want to do that. We want to use true Docker volumes. So let's go ahead and tell it, will you rewrite that to use Docker volumes? Again, we can literally take these and copy and paste them in from the other individual services. So all this is doing is setting up with a MySQL root, which we'll want to change in that regard. We'll copy this one out here. Let's encrypt. Everything else looks really good, but we'll notice now we're using volumes. And the difference is how this section is set up. You'll notice before it had a dot slash something, which means it's just using the directory of whatever I execute it from in order to copy that data for the container to use. When we use a volume, this is much better because now we can detach that volume. If I was to reload that container, it would look for that volume and then keep up to date with that running data. Where you would run into issue here is, say you go ahead and run this, and then you need to update CTFD. There's a new version that comes out, right? That's what we were seeing at the top of my screen here on the admin panel. New version available. So in order for me to do that update, I would have to come out here and re-pull all that information that was out here. If I didn't use volumes, there's a chance I could lose my data. That's the reason it's important to export that zip file and some other stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and use those volumes. So to start everything, we just have to run this Docker compose when we get it up. If we want to back up those volumes, it even gives us the nice little command here to do that, which will go ahead and tar zip up all of our volumes. And we could tell that to maybe send that to our house on an FTP server or some other place where we could back up copies of our production system. So this all looks good. We need to change those DB passwords. We must point some kind of DNS to this server in order to use it. Don't publish on port 8000. We know that. That's why we have Nginx running for that in front of us. And that looks good. Now, normally they're going to want you to run this in two separate compose stacks. And that's because Nginx should be running by itself. It really shouldn't be an all-in-one package. But that's fine for the purpose of what we're doing here. We could do that. So all we have to do is take this file. We'll copy that. Let's go to our back to our instance here. And we can still use this UI. This is perfectly fine. So if we do an ls here, we can see we're in our home directory. Let's go ahead and make a folder for CTFD. So mkdir CTFD ls, and then we'll go ahead and go into that one. Great. So let's use nano. Is nano available? Great. So we'll use nano docker-compose.yaml. We can copy and paste that direct export from ChatGPT. Let's kind of scroll up, see if there's anything that we may want to change. Now, we do know there's things we want to change, right? We need to change our root password and some other options in here. I'm going to go ahead and change this, but we're going to end up trashing it. So you would want to do this on something that isn't being recorded, right? So we're going to say my CTFD instance, for example. Now, you'll never really need that, but you want to obviously keep everything secure in case you have to troubleshoot down the road. We'll save that with a Control X and Y, and we can see that that file is available. Oops. All right, and we got some data in there. That looks good. So to run that, just like it told us right in that particular chat, is to go ahead and run Docker Compose up. So that looks good. And we'll notice in this case, it doesn't run because we don't have permission. So we'll need to use sudo in order to do that. You can add the Ubuntu user to sudo. However, sometimes they recommend that, sometimes they don't. It's easier just to run from the sudo side. So just sudo up. And again, what this is doing is pulling down all those different Docker containers. So it's pulling down Nginx Proxy Manager. It's pulling down MariaDB for our database. It's pulling down CTFD for our CTFD web server that we've been playing with. And then it's also running Redis in there, which is a caching server behind the hood. All right, looks like everything checked. We could do a Docker PS. Oh, sorry, sudo Docker PS. And that lets us see all the different containers that are running. And it looks like we're good there. We can see that it is currently listening on 8081.443. That is our Nginx proxy manager. Okay. Our CTFD is currently listening on no ports, and we notice it just restarted. So let's do this again. And we're noticing an issue where this is just continuously restarting, all right? Now, you guys should remember that we had to have an environment variable for that to work before. We can check that and make sure that's the case. So if we do a docker logs ctfd, oh, sorry, sudo. And there we go. We need to set a secret key environment and variable in order for that to work, or we could set this ctfd secret key file. Either one would work. We're going to go ahead and set that environment variable. So let's just go into our Docker Compose. And that needs to be under this section here. And this will be called secret key. Now, obviously, you should generate something here in order for this to be more secret. Just for the demo here, I'm going to just type in a few things like that. Control X and Y. And then we can go ahead and rerun that Docker command of up, but we also want to do a -- build, which will make sure it builds a new file of those. Look, notice that CTFD got recreated. So sudo docker ps. Okay, great. Now we can see that that system's up and running. We can also see it's listening on port 8000 there. All right. So that looks good. Now the problem is we didn't want that listening on port 8000, at least not out to the internet on all ports. But we can see that it's not listening on all those. It's just internally listening to it on like it's 127. So we should be good on there. If we listen out here with our ss -tunlp, that will tell us the ports that we're all listening on. This all looks pretty good. We're only listening on 80 and 443 out on our actual interfaces, so we're good there. Go back to our instance, and we can see our public IP address here. So let's open that, and we don't see anything there. Let's go to HTTP for the time being. Ah, and our proxy manager is up and going. All right. So what we need to do is log into the admin and set up our proxy manager first. Again, proxy manager is there for us to be able to SSL encrypt all of this. So to do that, you do /admin. Wait, unless I completely botch that. Oh, come on. Sorry, I'm trying to remember what I'm missing here. Oh, 81. That's what I'm missing. Okay, so we want to go to port 81. Provided it's actually listening. Double check that. Yeah, it looks like it is. So I believe that's because we have our private running over here on this side, and 81's probably not exposed. So we would need to look at our security, and we can see by default, it only allows port 80, 443, and 22. So we would need to add an inbound rule so that we would allow 81 in. 81 is what is the proxy manager. Normally, you wouldn't want to expose that clear out to the internet. So we will temporarily put it on to get you access to it, and then we could temporarily shut it back off. So it's been a while since I've been in here. Let's go ahead and look at our security group here, Launch Wizard. And we have an inbound rule. We could edit our inbound rules. Let's add a new one. Custom TCP of 81. And full CIDR block, that looks good. Now, this is also what source you're going to allow that to come in from. So that may be something where you want to limit that down to maybe your public IP address of whatever you're connecting from. That way, you're not allowing anybody and everybody in there. That would be a much better idea. For this purpose, I'm going to leave it wide open because we're going to end up closing it down anyway. Again, this should be 81. Okay, that looked like it worked. Let's refresh this. Might take a little bit to take effect. 81 looks good. Source is good.
Which port would you recommend? Like if we're gonna do it to the outside, like for example, well, we want to host it like at an event.
You would. That's the reason I'm showing you this with Nginx proxy, because then you would have SSH just over regular 443. This is just purely setting this up so that we can set up the proxy manager. It should be able to access that at this point. I'm not sure why.
Okay, so using a proxy would be the ideal thing.
Yes, because then you can secure it in that fashion. And we could even set it up where, you have to type in a password to get in. There's all sorts of things you can do with Nginx Proxy Manager. It's a really lightweight, very simple to use. It uses Let's Encrypt certificates, so you don't have to go buy certificates for any reason. Works really well there.
Yeah, I haven't tried that one, so I'll give it a try.
I don't know why it's not popping up here, so I'm probably missing some other rule. Let's see, outbound rule, allowing everything outbound, inbound. That looks good. There again, if somebody, it's been forever since I've been in here, so if I'm missing something, please pipe up. Huh. Well, rules all look good. I don't see any issue there. Yeah, so we won't get anything back on that. Should get something back there. Should get something back there. All right, maybe it's something under the networking I'm missing here. Public address, open address. Doing any kind of fancy NAT setup that I'm missing. So I need to reboot it over there. That instance doesn't seem to be responding there. So that might be why. Let's go to our dashboard. Instances. It's running one. Obviously, free tier isn't a great tier. Let's just reboot it, see what happens. Oh, I apologize for the delay here, but that was not what I expected because it seemed to be running fairly well otherwise. Huh. Well, we're coming up close to the break here anyway. So uh, what I would do is let's go ahead and take our 30-minute break that we have coming up. We'll take it just a hair early. And while that's running, we'll see if this can come back and I can bring you guys into the fold there. And then, like I said, for the rest of the day was basically helping you guys do this kind of stuff. We had, make sure I'm not missing anything else we had on our list. We do have a couple little short chapters that we can get through. And then if you guys did want to complete any of the forensics labs, you'll see those available out there on the NetLab system. So that won't be a big deal. But I want to get to that, and I want to get to this implementation and planning and courses because I think that was of interest to you guys as well. Hopefully you're getting enough out of today. All right, I'll pause that recording. Recording here. So, like I said, I just got an email that was telling me, hey, you're authorized to go ahead in the US East. So I just had to wait a little bit on a new account. And then I added this 81 back in, which allows anybody to hit that. And then you go ahead and set up your Nginx proxy. So we went to that same URL. Again, it'll be with HTTP at this point on 81. So I'm just going to set this up temporarily here. Okay. And you should get a screen like this. So this is Nginx Proxy Manager. And the idea behind this is, again, it's going to act as your proxy for your CTFD instance going out to the real world. You'll notice if we go to that IP address that we had before, and we currently have that set to just straight 80, we should get this that says, hey, Nginx Proxy Manager is up, but you need to go ahead and actually create an account. If we go to our :8000, you'll see that we got nothing. And remember, 8,000 is what our instance did for the CTFD. And we can go back into our instance now. We should have access, I believe. There we go. And we could do our sudo docker ps, and we can see we're up. Now, we'll never see anything on 8,000 because, again, it's not listening on the actual network interface. It's just local to this machine that it's listening on port 8,000. So what we need to do on this side is set up a host and a new proxy host, and we need to give it some kind of domain. Now, this is usually where you own a domain, and you want to set this up for a DNS so that everything goes through. In order to get an SL certificate, you would have to send your students to some domain, whatever that may be. So in my case, like I mentioned before, I've got tons of little domains. So let me log in here to one, and I will set one up. Forgot about that timer. Sorry about that. I know that's loud. Go. Okay, hopefully I can get signed in here. And all I'm going to do is set up ctf.profz.dev, which just fits the same structure that we had here set up before. So let me log into my provider. All right. And so, I know your school may have one for you if you need to set it up at the .edu. I'll be honest, I go around that here. I just go buy a domain. We're talking $8 a year. I have control over it. I don't have to deal with anybody getting permission and that kind of stuff. I just set it up. Your mileage may vary at your institution as to what you can do. But it would be great, even if you can get your department just to get you something .com or .dev or something to play with. It would be great, and it's pretty useful in the lab environment. So I am just setting up an A record that points our CTF. Again, ctf.propc.dev. I personally use Namecheap. I've used Cloudflare. I used to use GoDaddy way back in the day, but these days most of mine and my customers are through Namecheap. Cloudflare is a really good option. I won't lie. Cloudflare is good. So IP address wise, I'm actually just going to steal this public IP address that we got from Amazon. All right, and set that for a 1-minute timer. Okay, so now that it's good on this side, we'll go ahead and add that domain in. Again, that was just ctf.propc.dev. Hit enter. It's key to hit enter there. I don't know how many times I've done that wrong, but you want to hit enter, so you should get this little box. Once that's up, your internal scheme is HTTP, and then this is going to be CTFD. So we don't have to figure out the IP address. We just know that that is our container name, this little CTFD right here, which is great. So that's what we plug in here. And we need the port number. And that port number is going to match up to this port number here. So we would type in 8000. We typically want to block little web exploits. We could go ahead and allow WebSockets in there as well. At the top, we'll come up to SSL, and we want to generate a certificate for this. And we're going to use Let's Encrypt for that. We'll force SSL so that we don't allow anybody to come in on HTTP, protect our students a little bit. Go ahead and enable HTTP2 support, and I tend to use a DNS challenge. The option of not doing a DNS challenge would be to use an email, and you can set that up there as well. That's what I'm going to do here in a little bit. Let's see if they still allow that. So a DNS challenge is going to be if they have a plugin to, say, Namecheap and some of the other ones, you could do that. I personally like to just use the other challenge there. So I'm going to do a settings, see if I could just do this for now. And it should prompt me up for a email account to set up for Let's Encrypt. So let's see if they still allow that. There we go. Looks like that went through. If I click on the link over here, sure enough, it sends us right to that CTF setup that we have up and running on the Amazon cloud. And so you folks should be able to go to that same URL right now. You would actually hit my setup page because we haven't set something up. But say we wanted to transfer that one we built in the classroom over, we could just simply create a quick name. Doesn't matter what we do here. We do need to create a simple username just to get this thing to go through. And great. And we'll need to log in that first time. Okay. And so once we got that in, we'll go to our admin panel, config, and our import. And we can go ahead and go to import, choose that file we exported earlier. Give it a little bit of time. I'm just going to take a little bit as it brings everything in. Our connect, we can go ahead and just check our status again here. Looks good. So again, real simple on the Nginx proxy manager. You could also go into your settings and set some of that up as well. For whatever reason, I keep losing connectivity out to this. I don't think it's firewall or something on my side that's causing some problems there. So. Let's see if I need to kill that off. Shouldn't have any impact there. Looks like that instance is just in the process of reloading. Not sure why Amazon is having such a tough time with that particular section, but it appears to be. That might be part of it too. That's really odd. I'm not sure what Amazon's deal is, but otherwise, that would work exactly the way we would expect it, where it would go ahead and load up that instance that we had already created, and you should be good to go. I don't know if anybody's following along on Amazon. Have you had any of those issues on that side? Definitely seems to be some kind of Amazon issue, not on this side. So. Try to reboot it here and see if something's goofy. All right. Well, did that at least get you the steps of what you would do to get it up and going? At that point, you're good to go. Like I said, you could import your zip file, and you should be pretty solid. I'm guessing this is some oddity going on with Amazon. Okay, great.
Makes me want to give up on both Amazon and Google.
Yeah, yeah. I can't say, like I said, I've used them in a very long time. Like I said, I personally use DigitalOcean for most of that stuff. It seems a little simpler platform, and the pricing's always right. I've never had an issue on the pricing side. So most of those, that's all AI stuff. But on the compute side, if you build it as an app, which ours wouldn't quite qualify there, typically it's these $4 droplets is what I use. Every now and then I'll need to bump it up to the next tier, but quite frankly, that $4 tier usually gets you about half a gig of RAM and a single CPU. So you do get a little better ones with Amazon with their E2 ones, but I honestly have had not a whole lot of issues with the $4 and $6 droplets. Even if I wanted to bump up to a premium Intel, it's not like it's unreasonable.
Thank you.
Huh? I'm definitely getting kicked out, so I think that's part of it. Theory, if all went well, you should be able to go to that ctf.proxy.dev. Yeah, and I think there's an issue with that instance, whatever it may be with their free tier. All right. What else were we looking to cover today that you guys wanted to get here before we end up? So that's kind of what I wanted to do here for the rest of the day. We got about an hour and a half. I want to make sure you guys get all the materials that I didn't forget something along the way here. So let's go back through the website. Is there anything under resources or anything else I made promises of that aren't up here today. And overall, how are you guys feeling? I know it's the problem with these workshops is it's a information overload, a big brain dump of stuff. So hopefully you got what you wanted out of it. And if not, I got about an hour and a half to get you that. So yeah, Azure used to be pretty good about giving access to. I agree. And if you use Azure DevTools for students, they used to have Azure DevTools for teaching that ended back in August. But for students, they can still get that access to do Azure as well. What I always like, and it takes a little bit of work, but if you go and if you get the GitHub student pack, developer pack, this is really good for you or your students, one or the other. They just have to verify that you are a student, and with that student developer pack, they're going to get a lot of different goodies that are in there. So you have to kind of start through your education. Now, obviously, this isn't going to work on mine. I'm already an instructor, and they know that. But as a student, they could create a GitHub account. They could get access to this developer pack. You're going to get free access to a lot of different tools that are out there. But one of them is you get DigitalOcean droplet support. You get $200 in free credit. Namecheap, they'll get a free domain registration with a .me. So that's a great way to do some testing. Even with Azure, you can get $100 credits at Azure. Lots and lots of benefits in here. I have them do all of their training with, if we're doing Python, I have them use PyCharm. And so they're able to get the full professional version of PyCharm as an IDE. They can obviously use VS Code and some of the other ones out there as well. The only thing like I said, they get access to so many different services out here that they can use publicly. This works really, really well. What's slick in some of these realms, so there you noticed I copied and pasted my Docker or my Docker Compose into there. What would be slick is actually doing kind of what I did with my GitHub, where you store your GitHub files and you have a Docker Compose for your different services. And then in your container, all you have to do is do a git clone of your repository. And that way, if you update your Docker file, you don't have to go search back through all of your different little instances in order to get that up and working. It works really well that way. And so I have a kind of a repository of different Docker container, Docker Compose files that if I need to spin up in a hurry, I can just check them out and run those. The other cool part is if you do it in that fashion, that's realistically how this works here. So as you guys noticed, I was updating URLs. I push it out to GitHub, and then I have a service that's listening for me to commit new changes. When it does, it goes ahead and rebuilds the Docker container for the website you guys are all accessing, this one here, and it checks it every minute. And then if I push a change, it will immediately show up here on the live website. Otherwise, I can run it local, tweak it the way I like it, and then push it on out to GitHub, and away it goes. So it's a good developer flow. If you're not used to programming, in the long term, it will save you if you can get into that kind of flow. But otherwise, even if you just get students signed up for some free access on those systems, they can do that quite a bit. A lot of times they have to have a verification email. So as an instructor, I have to just confirm that they, especially if they try to do it off campus. So if they're not coming from a public IP that's registered to a university, you will generally have to have an email that says this student is a virtual student. They are a part of this particular class, and you have to give the class name, the class number, things like that. Because they turned it into a little bit of a headache, I stopped doing it for when I had 25, 30 students in a classroom. But it is still a great way for them to get access to it. Any other kind of resources that I may have talked about this week that I haven't really listed in here, or you guys want to kind of cover a little bit? Hopefully that crash course in Docker helped a little bit. I know that wasn't the best one. There's some really good ones out there, so I encourage you to do a little YouTube searching, and frankly, Udemy will have some really good Docker stuff as well. But realistically, GitHub or ChatGPT and those are your friends, right? I mean, you saw me get it built. Now, the only problem is if you don't know what that does, you don't know how to edit it, or you don't know what to change when you need to change. But that's where you can learn over time. You can have it build a particular Docker Compose for you, and it gives generally really good suggestions, even on the free tier of ChatGPT. And so you're not giving away any personal identifiable information or anything like that in those config files. Make sure you copy it out. You add in any like secret key and all that stuff we had running. You would add that after the fact. So you're not giving that information out to the model. So what would you folks like to do with the last hour and a half here? Is there something else I can demo or talk about, or? So integration with the LMS, what in particular are you looking for, Hector? Yeah, so the current lab system that I built there doesn't quite have any LTI integration or anything like that yet. Same way with the CTF, I don't really have a way of sending that final score over via LTI. And I'll be honest, you could write something to do that, but it would be very complicated, and it's really dependent on the LMS you use. So you might write it for one, and then it only works on that one, and it may only work on that version. That's the problem with LTI. Even though it's the generalized standard, it doesn't always work for everybody, and it's always an upward battle. In my case, I tend to use it where I'll set up points in my Blackboard shell or my LMS shell, and then retrieve the information once the CTF is over. I set that end date, and then I can still log in as an admin, figure out what the final score is, or if I need to give points to any individual students. And once I've done that, I can transfer those scores into whatever LMS. Anything else you guys can think of? I know one other thing you guys wanted to know was about my undergrad type programs and stuff. So I can do that here in a little bit, but I wanted to see if there was anything course related. Creating scenario type questions. Yeah. So, and I assume you're referring back to kind of what we did before of just generating Jeopardy style, or are you wanting more attack of VMs type questions?
Yeah, for instance, say if a student is studying for a Security Plus certification, and we have everything laid out here for them, questions and types, and I want to give a scenario, say uh, such as a security type scenario where, say, a user clicked on a link and now they're panicking and trying to figure out what to do. Is there a way that we can actually have multiple choice type questions in there that lay out a scenario versus a like multiple choice of 1 or 2 words there? So I guess, is there a way that for them to actually type in something?
Yeah, you're talking about on the CTF side, maybe? Is that what you're
Right.
referring to? Yeah, so when they come in here, for example, and they go to their challenges, let me just log back into here.
I'm sorry if I missed this. I may have missed this part.
Yeah, that's no problem. On the CTF challenge part, that's where they get these challenges here. And so, for example, network recon, they get asked a question and then they have to answer that on this side and hit submit. You could do way more in-depth question here. So you could present a scenario to them. And if you wanted to do like an ABCD, by default, CTFD doesn't have that for free, but you can purchase that plugin There is a plugin you can get from them for that. I have yet to write one. I was hoping just to rewrite the their plugin, but honestly, for the price of where it is, if you go to their store, I want to say it's $20, and you can get that multiple choice style. If that is something you would use a lot in the classroom, $20 is pretty cheap for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yep. And to use those plugins, you essentially just have to drag and drop it into the plugin folder. I wish they made it a little easier to use in the UI. But you essentially download this as a zip file, and you extract that into the plugin folder when you deployed CTFD. So for example, if I come in here to my Docker, and let's take a look at that instance. I should have one up. There we go, this one here. If I do an ls in here, I can see all the files that were included with that Docker container. And if we look closely, we should have CTFD. And then there's a plugins folder there. And so what you could do there is download the ones that you're looking for, like the multiple choice plugin, and pull it into this folder. So whether you did that with wget from a web server, or that's usually the best way to do it, is host it somewhere that you can pull it down from. And then if you extract it in here and reboot, it takes off and starts working. So like dynamic challenges is already there. There's no autocomplete in the in the command line here. Oh, I got wget in front of there. So dynamic. And that's because it's not a file. Why? So those are little plugins that you can have set up in there, and you can have access to them in that way.
I see. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it'll look like that. It's just little simple Python packages that allow you to add in extra functionality. And if you do a little browsing on the internet, you'll find other people that wrote those plugins that can be pretty useful there.
So it's possible to make a custom plugin?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. So you can even create a custom plugin that would maybe connect it to your LMS, or maybe you want to spit it all out to a CTF or a CSV or something like that. You could do that kind of stuff if you wanted to.
Okay.
So for example, these guys have used a plugin to create different game types like King of the Hill, where you are having to answer those questions, and it kind of goes beyond typical Jeopardy style. They have some individualized infrastructure if you pay for their online service, where they'll automatically set up Juice Shop and a bunch of challenges for you, or give you web shell access to stuff, because they're basically running little containers alongside of it. So if you purchase their system, you get a lot of extra support. It could integrate even with your school's accounts, so you don't have to create accounts. It'll actually integrate with it if your IT would allow that kind of thing. But you can definitely do all that for free. You just have to do it by hand. You look at their GitHub, and again, if you are on their plugins here, you can see there's a bunch of other plugins that you could add in. So for example, if you wanted multiple questions to happen at once, that would be one, multi-answer one. And if you want to write your own, they give you documentation on how to write your own in here too. There's some pretty cool ones that the public has kind of written over time that are fun to pull out of here and kind of play with. So. All right. Anybody else have any other questions and stuff there, or would you rather I just cover a little bit of courses? My goal now, as we're at the end here, we talked about some forensics, and in the forensic side, trying to figure out what happened, the timelines, the evidence, and the reconstruction of what happened. We have to dig through those log files and metadata. So again, I encourage you to go out to the NetLab system that I gave you access to and do a couple labs out of forensics, particularly those that involve autopsy or volatility. which are two tools that Autopsy really does disk analysis. And I believe it's one of the first labs there in that series where you have to make a backup of a system, and you're going to use tools like Autopsy for that. Volatility is the one I was talking about where, the FBI is raiding an event and they don't want to pull the power cord on the system. They want to use things like volatility in order to dump the RAM and everything that's in the RAM to make sure that they don't lose anything that's running in that system. And there is no magic tool like it's talking about here, that you're going to have a sequence of events that you go through and you do little scraping at a time. It's not a race. It's more of an endurance thing where you have to figure and collect all the logs to build a case. And that's really the same tools that, whether you're in law enforcement or you're going to be in the cyber side, they're the same thing. I've had a lot of students from around the country that came back to get their masters, and they were, the FBI or they were their equivalent. One of the good ones I had was down in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the main forensic investigator for the city of Atlanta, and so he knew his stuff very, very well, and he was extremely happy with that lab set because it really taught the students the basics. And then when they get in and are able to use like Encase and some of the really higher end tools, that the concepts apply, but they could come in knowing the basic knowledge of things like Autopsy, et cetera. And then when they get access to the, multi-$1,000 packages, they could really use that same concepts. Some frameworks you should probably cover if you're going to bring cybersecurity in the classroom. Obviously, you should refer to the NIST cybersecurity framework. That's kind of the gold standard as to what they should be familiar with. You have NIST 800-601, which is focused on incident response. You have your CIS controls, and then the NICE workforce framework. This really does a mapping of the skills that you need to the job titles that are out there. So it's a really good one to kind of reference for students. That CyberSeek that I mentioned, that's a good one here that's really utilizing this NICE workforce framework. Okay. Let's see here. I'm not going to tell you how to teach your classes, but the idea here, if you haven't picked up on it, is I really like those hands-on labs and getting people to do not just the pure technical, like what we did for the most part today, but even those little games that we did on Monday, Tuesday, that weren't really games, they were just hands-on activities. That's a great way to really get those students involved early on, and they stay excited about it. And I think you guys saw that as we were working through them. The only thing I have on the capstone here, obviously there's some little notes, but that's really my favorite thing to do in a class. I'm not a huge fan of midterm exams and final exams, and there's some requirements obviously that schools are going to have there, but I personally like to focus on some kind of skills-based assessment. In other words, I know you can cheat on questions and this and that, but if I put a computer in front of you and I say, hey, tell me what's all running on this, you either have the skills or you don't. And it's a great way to see whether or not they've been doing their labs all along. Did they lie about it? Did they not lie about it? And did they really retain anything on the inside? I was really, really fortunate that the instructors I had in my undergrad and grad program taught in that same style, and that was some of the best features that I took from them to be a professor myself. One of my favorite classes was walking in, and the instructor sat down about 10 routers and switches and said, hey, here's a topology, go build it. And we had to not only figure out the topology, and then once we got it built, he introduced a whole lot of errors overnight, and we came back in the next day and we had to troubleshoot those errors. So whether he pulled out cables, flipped things around, misconfigured IP addresses or something like that on there, we would have to figure that kind of stuff out. And then once we got it figured out, then we had a section on optimizing that network. So being able to pull out logs and statistics and figure out where we were having bottlenecks with things that could be going on there. So it's really, really cool learning exercise. And to me, that's still the gold standard of testing these students. And that kind of brings us back to the implementation. So out of all the stuff you learned in this week, I know, like you said, you got to be able to digest it to figure out how we're going to use it, right? Um, but is there for sure something, at least one little piece that you can use in the classroom this week?
I think the broad perspective was helpful for me. Again, I'm a software guy,
Right.
and you know a little bit about some of the underpinnings, but you don't know the depth. And I remember probably 15 years ago talking to Rochester Institute of Technology, and they were talking about computer forensics and how you have to go into the machine, and by going into the machine you can change the machine, and all the tools and the level of sophistication is just fascinating. And I can't imagine staying on top of it. I think software changes fast. I can't even imagine how fast cyber changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Let's see. Latarsha, are you there? Out of curiosity? Oh, you were kind of.
Yes, I'm here.
One, did you finish the post exam?
Yes, I've been finished it. I'm sorry.
No. You're fine. You're fine. I just was checking my list to see if there was anybody I missed, and I wanted to get you in there. But while I have you, I wanted to ask you because you were teaching high school students, if I remember right?
Yes, high
And
school
so,
and junior college.
fantastic. Did you feel like you got what you were looking for in the beginner section? Because I know I'm super technical, so was this able to bring it to something in the beginner side?
Yes, it was really informative. I was frightened myself um, for taking the class because I didn't have any experience. But now I feel like I know the basics at least to give it to them. So,
Thank you. And I'm pretty sure that was Mark's goal with the whole class, right? Because he called me up and he's like, "Hey, we kind of have this need for an intro course. I know you do the super technical, but can you do intro?" That's actually harder than it sounds to go back and just do an intro.
right, it is. I know it is, but you made it really informative. You gave us a foundation to start from, and we can build in the future from it.
Great.
So I'm greatly appreciative, and I have learned a lot. It was frightening, but I learned a lot.
Perfect. Well, I'm sorry to call you out there, but I knew that when you had mentioned early on that that was where you were coming from. I know I have two ends of the spectrum in here, so I appreciate that. Appreciate that, Wanzamo.
Hey, Jason.
Mhm.
One of the classes I have starts out with the students, and it's computer concepts, and it's where you have all the students that are just getting in, but they don't really have a direction of where they want to go. So a lot is covered in showing them things and helping them make decisions on where they want to go. And I think what you have here is pretty amazing, and where it puts you to showing the students. But I also believe, in respect to how I've watched what you have said and tried to keep up with you, I think going at it this far with them in the beginning, I don't know. I kind of wonder if it would scare them off.
Yeah, it's finding that balance, right?
It really is. It really is. When you have somebody that has an open mind, they don't know where to go, and it's also interesting. I mean, we're talking about students that come in there in just the concept of talk about a keyboard and a function key and how there's the FN key and how it means that some of them don't even understand that. And so you start talking about this. I think this is fascinating as to what you have, and I think it makes me a lot more educated on what to say to the students.
Fantastic. Like I said, I greatly appreciate the feedback, and I hope really try to give that feedback to Mark. So when he sends out those feedback requests and stuff like that, like definitely give him that kind of feedback because I know he was anxious to see how this course was going to work out. And I like working with that group. The Summer Working Connections in general has been a really good group to work with. So. I guess since we got a little bit of time here, if you still want, I can kind of run through a little bit of what I do here at Fort Hays. Do it that way. Let me see if I was trying hard not to do any PowerPoints, but I do have one for that stashed away here. If that's still of interest, is that still something you wanted to see?
Very much.
Okay. Let's see here.
How old is Fort Hays?
It was founded in the early 90s. I'm sorry, early 90s, early 1900s. It's been around since General Custer came through. So Custer Hayes was basically here on the south side on the fort, and it's been kind of established very closely to that. That's a quiz question I should know, is when the university was founded, especially given that I've been out here so long. So it's kind of a quick overview. The department really started as a computer networking program, along with web and media was really the start of it. And it started out with television, news station, radio station. That was the media side. Web development and, like I say, computer networking. They were really big. Cisco, when we started that up in the late 90s, is when the department really came to fruition. And we kept that web and computer networking out of computer sciences realm at that point in time. A lot of that was because we eventually migrated over under the College of Business. So we originally started in the College of Arts and Sciences, which has changed, sevenfold. And we are not in the STEM college. We're actually in the College of Business as a department. We started off as the Department of Information Networking and Telecommunications. Really long word, so they decided to shorten that here a while back to informatics. And today we have at least 7 undergraduate majors that you can focus on. Now, technically, it's one major. It's a major of informatics. So you would have a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts, but we have the concentrations. And so we still have computer networking, web and mobile app development, information systems, health informatics, cybersecurity, and I believe there's 1 or 2 new ones that we just started here. Data analytics is another one that's came up. We have a couple minors with that, quite a few certificates, and then up to 8 grad programs. I think we're a little higher on the full-time faculty in that side. But the meat and potatoes, what you guys are interested in. So the cybersecurity programs from a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor of Arts side. I'm really, again, focusing on getting them to be SOC analysts or technicians. And that's so that they can go work in a security operations center or even a network operations center with a little bit of security background. They could also be cybersecurity analysts or consultants. If they chose to go off and start their own companies, they could certainly do that. Most of the coursework that's in there, and I'll go in that in a little bit more detail in a little bit, but they focus on the CCNA content for their networking. That's kind of legacy because we've been around with Cisco for a long time. I'm really trying to push them to the CompTIA realm, especially as Fort Hays has recently, they call it an affiliation now with 2 tech schools that were in the area. We essentially acquired them, and so they are the tech school portion of what we have at the university. It's kind of a direct pipeline into the university, which is great. And most of those are teaching the CompTIA side. So they're 2-year technicals going there. We do cover the Linux side, the firewalls, and the PCNSA. We used to have the VMware certification that's now dropped out and is closer to Proxmox. And we still have the AWS course in there as well. On the Master of Professional Studies, so we have a little bit different master's program than what most schools have. When I came through, it was a Master of Liberal Studies in order to get information assurance. And it was really called information assurance, but frankly, it was cybersecurity. It was more of that technical hands-on and not the policy procedure driven that we have today. That MLS was horrible. I wasn't a huge fan of it, primarily because you had 4 liberal studies classes that had absolutely nothing to do with technology. And I don't want to explain how many times I had to retake them because they just were of no interest to me. So we were able to come up with a concept of a Master of Professional Studies, which is a 30-hour program. And in that program, you will have 3 core classes in which you have paper writing like you would traditionally have in graduate, but it's very tech-centric. So my really big techies can handle that writing. And what's nice is we have some lead research faculty that really helps the students in that regard. We do not do a thesis or a dissertation type in our grad school. It's all capstone driven, so we do very much project driven in that side. So it's only 30 hours, which is great. Ends up being about 10 classes. And in that program, the cybersecurity one in particular, we're kind of getting them towards that digital forensic investigator, the penetration or vulnerability tester, intrusion detection, threat analysis, threat hunting, or even that tier 2 SOC analyst as they come in. And a lot of students are sticking around for that master's. One, the tuition's fairly low. 2, we have an accelerated program now that allows them to take 2 undergraduate credits that then transfer into the grad program. It actually goes the other direction. So they already have 2 classes done by the time they're done with their undergrad. That means they only have 8 more for their graduate degree. And they can usually knock those out within a year if they do it really quickly. Don't have anything else in their life going on. Some of the certs that we point to is going to be that Security Plus, Pen Test, CEH, CND. Ones that I talked about in this class would be the EC Council ones, and I use a lot of those essential ones. And a lot of times I will double them up, so they'll end up taking 2 certs during one semester because they are kind of entry-level certs, and those students are really happy to walk away with even some basic certs if at all possible. Other than those little minor entry level certs, I don't really push students to go take the certs. And that's because of our alumni feedback that you should have all the knowledge to be able to go take it. We are finding that it is beneficial to at least have your Security Plus. But at the end of the day, I want them to get hired because those employers are going to pay for those certifications. And anytime you want to get into any real cert like a CISSP or something in the certified ethical hacking or the OSW ones, there's several $100s to thousands of dollars if you're doing the ISC squared ones, right? So we really want employers to pay for that, not our students to pay for it out of pocket. And so we explain to students that it's really that kind of job market that when you get out there, your first job is all about getting introduced to it and get to a point where they're going to either A, pay for your tuition. So I have a lot of students that will come back and do their master's for that reason, or B, they're going to pay for certs. And you get as many certs as that company is going to pay for. And then once you've got all the certs, you're fair and equitable property. So start looking for other jobs. I know that sounds horrible, but that's the way it is in the networking field. The days of sticking around and doing 30 years at a company, it just doesn't exist anymore. So you're a higher commodity. They're either going to pay you or you can jump ship and go on to another job. And it's a hard mentality for a lot of students to get to where they're 2 years into that job. They're really kind of liking it, but they really should start shopping around and seeing if there's better job opportunities. Because I've had students come out and get tens of thousands of dollars worth of training and certifications until they got to their ultimate job that they really liked and it had all the benefits they liked. That's one thing I really stress with all my students. I could care less the dollar value that you got as a job offer. Let's really look at what you get for retirement. Let's look at what you get for health insurance. Those are the things that ultimately matter. And having been out in industry and changed some of that around, I give them those stories. You know, when I was working, I was very fortunate. Even from an early days when I was working as a student at that call center, they covered our insurance. It was ridiculously cheap. It was 20, 30 bucks or something like that for me to cover the entire family. When I worked at the ISP, it was 100% covered. When I went out to work in industry, I was fortunate that my company was able to pay 100% of our insurance. And so when I ended up with the wife and kids and stuff like that, they were paying. It was equivalent to almost $40,000 extra a year they were paying in my health insurance. And it's amazing because that insurance was ridiculously good. We're talking 90-10 kind of split, and your deductible was $100. The kind of stuff that doesn't exist anymore. They still have that plan today. They're one of the last ones in North Carolina to carry that Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So I explain that to students, and then, you know, coming back to a university and going to a state insurance plan, explaining that, yeah, I may have got just barely a little bit of a pay bump or took a little bit of a pay hit, but what really killed me was insurance, because I now pay out of pocket, you know, that 20,000 or at least half of what they were paying beforehand, now comes out of checks. So hopefully you guys can introduce that early on as well. That, you know, the dollar sign doesn't really matter if you have a lot of bills to pay. I explain that to my students all the time. Because I'm state funded, they go dig up my salary and they're like, "Oh, you're making that? You did." Yeah, come pay the bills that I have every month, and it doesn't matter. We have to take care of what it's like to be adults, right? And it's really hard to get that through to some students. So the other master's program is going to be the information assurance one. And again, that's more focused on governance and compliance, particularly when it comes to risk compliance and that incident response stuff that we were talking about. So they focus in on courses that are getting them to be security analysts from an information assurance side, policy, standards, information security officers, or even up to a chief CISO. And we've had students come out and be CISOs for that. Sorry about that. My mouse isn't clicking correctly. We're part of several different academic programs, and I really kind of blew these up when I came here. We've been Cisco forever, but I brought in EC Council, VMware, Red Hat, and Palo Alto. They've been really good partners to work with, and great access to curriculum and benefits and being a part of all those. We do use NDG for our lab platform, as you guys have been able to play with. We've had that since very, very early on, especially when we were dealing with Cisco gear. And because our primary student base was online at that time, we had several on campus, but online was a huge deal in the late 90s and early 2000s. We were way ahead of the curve of when most people were bringing things online. And NDG really allowed us to get those students to have access to that. So especially when it came to real gear, we didn't have to give them access to a lab, which means we didn't have to pay a security officer to be around. That platform allowed them to access and do their labs 24/7, 365, and it was still on real gear. So it's not like it was an emulation or a simulation. It was real Cisco gear. And then as NDG started to break out and do more and more virtualization stuff that came in about 2005, 6, somewhere in there, we were able to offer a lot other classes, and now you guys saw just how much they have available. That's a pretty old statistic there. The student organization, we've had several over the years. Back when I was here, most of those folded up shop. They had lots of money in their accounts, but they all folded up. And that's because it was really hard to get faculty to participate in those. So we've rebuilt and done the cybersecurity club when I came. And the goal was to get them additional training that I couldn't give them inside the classroom. I only have so many classes with them. It'd be really nice if they had a chance to do more. And they're a part of that National Cyber League, like we talked about, and we head out to conferences out in B-sides as well. We have our Information Enterprise Institute, and this is part of our NSA accreditation and being part of the National Cyber for Academic Excellence. There's several of those. Are any of you guys part of the CAE program at the 2-year level? Okay. It's quite the process to do it nowadays. Back when it first started, they really wanted to get a lot of schools involved in that. And it was a really big deal for us to get it in early 2008. Nowadays, or sorry, 2009 when we first went in there. And we've been redesignated a couple times since then. And now they're really cracking down, and it's not so much a numbers game where they're trying to get anybody and everybody. They're really trying to get the quality out and get those people up to date. So we were the first KBOR Kansas institution to earn that accreditation back in 2009, and we were redesignated in 15 and 22, and we'll be up for redesignation here within the next 2 years. City is a new initiative that was given to us by the state of Kansas, in which the Department of Commerce is funding us to work with small businesses and try to increase their cybersecurity posture, make sure they're being protected. And we do that through the form of city micro internships. So the idea is that we offer about 10 different services. There's a couple of those that are there. In which case, a small business in the area requests one of these services. We pair them with a student that has the credentials to be able to do that. And then they have about 2 weeks. We try to keep it in that 40-hour range, no more, so that they can complete that task. If it's too big of a task, we try to break it up into multiple. But the small business pays nothing, and we pay the students $400 for those on a per micro internship basis. So if they're able to get it done in 10 hours, they get the full 400. If they get it done in 40 hours, they get the 400. And this has been a fairly successful program. We've had saturated the local area, and so we're trying to get out now to a much larger area of Kansas and get people in there. We also have the option of venture creation out of those funds, where if a student decided they wanted to start a small business, particularly offering cybersecurity services in the state of Kansas, that we could even help them with angel investing and setting up business plans, things like that. So that's that old slide deck there. In terms of courses, which I think is what I thought I had in those slides, that must have been an older deck. And it's really hard to find this after they changed the website on me. So it's not that one. It is, let's see here. There we go. So our department itself has these core classes that they have to take. So they all take an intro to web class. They have the foundations, which kind of takes them through everything that we teach in the department and how that's relatable. So when we first started, the idea is that, you know, media and those guys would create content. The networkers had to figure out how to get that data somewhere. And the web and mobile app people at that point in time were the UI. They were the interface that we actually interacted with. So it was a great mesh of those services that we would offer out to the world. And it's turned out to be a really good program in that regard. So we bring in a little bit of public policy there as well. The web course is their own. I couldn't even tell you what they teach now, Jack. I believe they do a little bit of Web3 schools now, but that's changed so many times. Typically, it used to be a custom written course in which the students built a website that was hosted.
Yeah, we've got one that they host, and we've got to get some scripting into it, and we're struggling a little bit with how much do they need to know in HTML, CSS, and that stylistic stuff. And we've got an IT degree, a computer science, information systems, and we're going to have a cyber. So we've got a bunch of audiences, but how much is scripting? How much is traditional web? That's a balance for us.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, if you're interested, I can definitely put you in touch with the person that's responsible for that course, at least as the one that built it, and then it's now taught by a couple people on campuses.
That'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. In terms of our cybersecurity concentration, these are the courses that are required. So we have Internet Networking 1 and 2, and again, those map out to CCNA 1 and 2 in their content. So it'd be the equivalent of what you guys are doing in Network plus an additional layer to that, or a little bit higher than that. One thing that I never really liked out of Network Plus was they really were very broad. So I wasn't worried that they weren't vendor centric, but they were so broad that there wasn't a whole lot of hands-on, so to speak. And I struggled with that because we had labs, and NDG offers Net Plus labs. But because you're sitting in such a generic world, I felt like the students were struggling. What do you guys see in that, or what do you guys use to give them that hands-on skills in the networking?
So we are
really
a
good.
Cisco Academy, and that's
Okay.
what we use.
Yep.
Two people talking at the same time. So we use Packet Tracker in our courses, the Cisco Packet Tracker.
Okay.
Really good.
Yeah, Packet Tracer was a great tool that came in, and those intro classes like Internet Working 1, which is the equivalent of CCNA 1. Packet Tracer works great in order to get them squared away. It's very low cost on you. You don't have to buy the hardware and everything else. But getting them used to plugging in routers and switches, right? Even though they can do it theoretically in Packet Tracer, it's too many times I've had my own seniors come through this, and I take them out on those micro internships and say, okay, go ahead and configure that, or go ahead and crimp an end on that cable. And they stare at you like a deer in the headlights. And you're like, well, we know we taught you that in those early classes. And they're like, yeah, but I took those as online classes. I never actually crimped it. And that's where we started shaking our head. Like, there's a reason way back in the day we used to force people to go buy kits and crimp an end and mail it into us. And that's how you got graded. Um, Obviously, we got away with that over time. And then we're still finding out that students are really struggling with those basic skills. Um, when I hired 4 high school students this last year to work with me and just run wire, all they did was run wire for security cameras and crimp ins, punch down, dress down racks, stuff like that. And they had no knowledge coming in whatsoever. When they came into the program this fall, they were light years ahead of their peers because they had actually seen it and done it. As a matter of fact, the instructor let them teach that whole section. Because it's really good to get them those skills. So I would encourage you, if you're not doing things like that, to make sure you still do that. We think of those skills are no longer necessary, but they're absolutely necessary. They're no different than an electrician or a plumber or anybody else. You still have to run the cable, and you still have to do the maintenance on that cable. So the virtualization, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Kirk, you nailed it. You really got to find them some kind of equipment to get on. It doesn't have to be fancy equipment, but they need to understand what it is in their hands, how to plug stuff in. Obviously, when I came through it, there was a big difference between a patch cable and a crossover cable. Today, we don't really see that kind of stuff. Or if you were on the Cisco side, you had to have the serial on the right side, otherwise it didn't communicate. Again, some of that technology is a little dead. That 322 class that you see there is actually meant to be like their senior level. That's my SOC class, security operations. So it's usually taken at the end. I just don't have official number there. 360 is my Python course. So I make sure that all cybersecurity students have at least some exposure to Python. As a matter of fact, there's typically 2 courses they're required to take. They'll take the advanced one later on. That comes out of this 15 hours of elective credits. The Linux and networking is directly the Linux 1 and Linux 2 from NDG. The reason that we teach those is because I helped write those early on, and so I know the material. I know the value that students are getting out of that material. We also partner with Red Hat, but we save that for the advanced Linux courses, just so they get a little bit of both Debian and Red Hat side. The network security firewalls course is primarily Palo Alto. So the students are going to go through the entire PCNSA. I usually have students go take that certification if they choose to. But I also sprinkle in a lot of pfSense and OpenSense because realistically, unless they're going to go work for a Fortune 500, they're probably not going to be installing Palo Altos anytime soon. But it's good to know that because they're the ones that have the most features. And so once you understand the concepts of zone-based firewalls and the security rules and everything else, you can apply those to other vendors. You just need to learn that basics. That is one thing I will pride Cisco for being able to do for so many years is they at least taught you the basics where, I quit Cisco. I was going to go do a Cisco engineer as my undergrad. That's what everybody was doing. And right before I started my senior year, I had alumni come back and talk to me and say, hey, instead of going to Cisco, you really need to look at Brocade, look at Interisys, some of these other names that are coming up. Cisco's losing market share. You should really figure out these other ones, Juniper. And he was right. That's exactly what happened. And so being able to pivot, I could still take the information I learned on Cisco because all of those vendors like to use a Cisco command-like structure, but the concepts are all the same. So anybody teaching a firewalls style course? Okay. Is there interest to add that kind of stuff, or are you getting any kind of pressure to add that kind of stuff to your program?
Well, we have a firewall course, but I'm not teaching it.
I gotcha. Okay.
We, we're a Fortinet Academy
Yep.
uh, institution, you could say. I know you all are Palo Alto. Swing over now our Fortinet Academy, but I don't teach it. I'm familiar with it, but I don't teach it. We actually have it's a virtual class, and we have an agent who that's his primary job, managing Fortinet firewall. So he's really, really knowledgeable, and students are looking to have him as an instructor. He knows them in and out.
That's the best, is if you can find somebody that actually does it in industry and come in and teach it. I hate to say it, but they're far better than us other professors that are there, full-time staff, because it's very hard to keep up with this stuff. And if we're not out doing it on the side, it's really hard to keep up on the newer tech. You fall into that paradox where I've got some of my Cisco instructors that are very much stuck in Cisco because that's all they've ever taught and all they've ever known. And they really don't like changing from those classes because they're so used to doing that for so many years. But Fortinet's a great option. I've actually worked with several schools to bring Fortinet on the NetLab platform, even though it's not officially supported. I've definitely helped them over the years do that. And I actually am trying to search them out over time here to add them as an academy so that I can split my firewalls course into 1 and 2, and they would get more exposure from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then we used to have the option for them to either take client or server. So if they felt really good about Windows 10, stuff like that, they would go stick with the server class. We've since scratched that. Of course, our website's never up to date. So we now have one main Windows class in which they will take both client and server in the same semester, which is great because now we're guaranteeing that they're getting exposure to that. And then the advanced class is getting rewritten. A lot of that was centered around Cisco material or Microsoft materials. It was really hard. All the old stuff had kind of dried up, meaning we had stuff up to Server 2019. Some of it was 2016. 2012 was the last one that we had. And now you got all this Server 22 stuff, but there's really no content unless you're using Microsoft Azure. So we've kind of just condensed it down to one and started using a little bit of Azure in order to teach that. Then we have about 15 hours of electives, and some of those electives that I force students to do would be things like Proxmox. They also have some cloud and virtualization software, AWS, all that kind of stuff we talked about before. Yeah, Fernando?
Yeah, no, going back to the server. Yeah, I just developed a 2025 that we're doing certified, but first 16. So I'm like, 2025, we're going to convert it to who we are. But yeah, I was finding materials and labs to do it. I'm barely trying to introduce Azure into the curriculum, but again, there's no one else kind of like doing it, so it's kind of hard. That's the challenge with new technology and doing it on a budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the instructor that teaches those two classes, he's technically under the light item of management information systems. He's not fully in my cyber side, even though he's teaching most of my cyber courses with me. He just doesn't have the time to rewrite it. He just finished his PhD, so now that he's done, we're hoping he will have some time to write those classes the way he would rather use them. But that's a niche that we fall into in the university section, especially, is we just need something. Give us the content. We can teach the content, but coming up with it from scratch is always a time-consuming process, especially if you're not paid for it or working on it. It's very hard to justify doing that. On the master side of the house, for the cybersecurity side, again, they have these core classes. So they'll start out with Pro Seminar, where they learn APA style writing, and then into research methods and capstone. Not to worry about that. Our foundations course is really their CISSP prep. So we have a CISSP that teaches that. He will occasionally sponsor some of the students if he feels like, and he does it under his own regard. He has no obligation to do so. And didn't for a very long time, to get students to understand that's a pretty heavy cert. This operating system security class is our Security Plus. And so we do try to push them to go get that one, especially here recently, where more and more employers are requesting that they have that before they even get the job interview. A lot of that is being hurt by AI, believe it or not, because a lot of AI is sorting all the resumes. Nobody's really doing that anymore. So when HR gets that resume, it's never a human that looks at it until it's been sorted 13 times and it finally landed on somebody's desk. And if they don't have that word security plus in there, it usually gets rejected, is what we're starting to find out. Other courses they'll take is information systems forensics. This is where I typically used either the forensics material, and I still do, the material that you see there on NDG, and I also combine that with EC Council's Digital Forensics Essentials. That one, even though it's a quote essentials course and a lower end one, it's a very tough cert. There's a lot of information and a lot of things they got to memorize in that. So even though that one's geared towards quote high school and 2-year, I don't believe it. I think that's a pretty hefty course out of all the ones I've taught. And I've taught almost all the essentials at some point now. It's really hard for them to go take the full forensics investigator from EC Council or something, because they would have to pay $500-600 on top of their tuition for that. I wondered that, Hector, if he was losing his internet. Network defense course, that one is again another one I've kind of wrote from scratch. I used to use a little bit of EC Council's network defense essentials, but that one I'm going to scrap and rewrite this spring. And it will be focused on when I originally taught it, which was IDS, IPS technology. So we talked about Saracata, we talked about Splunk, and some of these other tools, Waza. Those are the kind of tools that I want to bring back into that network defense course, where these students have been bringing back feedback from industry, and that's what they really need. They need those hands-on skills with those type of tools. And then my pen testing course is, again, used to be Ethical Hacking Essentials from EC Council, which covers a good chunk of their CEH type curriculum. Now I'm using a little bit of that in the beginning, but I've since changed that where they do the foundational knowledge and then they're doing CTFs all semester long. So it's a 16-week course. They do the training type stuff in the first, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks now. And the last 8 weeks is just pounding them with CTF challenges where they actually have to go try those skills. So here's a VM, break into it, follow the pattern, follow the workflow, and get the results out and write up a report. And then outside of that, they're requested to do 2 electives. So if they didn't do their undergrad with us, they would do network security firewalls and advanced Python. If they did do those as an undergrad, then we try to get them in here with a couple other options. And then last would be the information assurance one. Let's see if I can find that one. As I know we're getting closer to the drawdown here, but there we go.
So you're sorry to ask, guys, this master's is also 100% online as well?
Yes. So that's one thing we've always done is we do it online and on campus, but it can be done 100% online. Yep. And we've had students from all over the world actually come and take that. And we've had really good luck in that regard. Let's see, is your graduate cybersecurity program solely based on labs and research? Yeah, so I really want to focus on the technical hands-on ones, Mo. It's not even so much research. There's some there because you have to have that little core component, but it is not the research that you would expect to find at, for me, it would be like the equivalent of K-State or KU. They are a research institution and accredited at that. We are not doing that type of thing. The research we're doing here is they would go off, for example, in their capstone project, they would need to do research on what it's like for Waza, for example. What are the different signs out there? And they would go do research on that. And then at the end, they would do a capstone where they would work with a company to deploy that. And they would use that in a real live environment is one use case. So we're very project based in there. We don't do theses. We don't even do comprehensive exams. It's really based off what they're doing within those research and their capstone. there are exams, so don't get me wrong. They're going to have those hands-on labs. There's always going to be quizzes or their final exam stuff. I personally take a lot of that final exam stuff out and I make it skills and hands-on. So they have a little written portion to it, but I want to know if at the end of the day they can actually do the work. And honestly, that's what sets us apart from a lot of institutions around us and why students end up coming here more than anything else. Oh yeah, you can definitely reach out to me. Yep. Like I said, everybody should have my email, and if you don't, I can definitely send you an email to make sure you have it. On that information assurance side, so these are going to be a little less technical in terms of tools and hands-on labs, but we do more so it'd be like what we were teaching in day 1, day 2, where we're going over these concepts. In this case, they're focusing more on like web security, where they're going through a bunch of those different frameworks, that information security policy development. These are taught by some of our adjuncts that do this for a living. So they're working with those literally Fortune 500 type companies, or they are CISOs at different companies, and they're helping these students develop those skills in order to actually do it out in industry. Same way with management information security and information risk. All those topics that we covered, they're covering it to the nth degree and matching those to governance and compliance. And what are the hot topics in those? So the government is really big right now in some compliance that they just released. For whatever reason, that name's escaping me again. Used to have that rolling off my tongue. But because of that, we've had a lot of students come back. If we've had a lot of, your non-traditional students, again, most of our master's programs are non-traditional students where they've been out in industry, they're trying to take that next step. And we have so many coming back for this information assurance side, especially if they're non-technical or they want a change in venue, but still want to be on the tech side of the house. So I don't know if that was all beneficial, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're utilizing in there. And I won't say it's always the right way. So like I said, I change those classes pretty often. I probably shouldn't say that on these recordings, but if I don't like something that's going on, or if I start to see an industry shift, I don't wait. I immediately change the content in the class, because by the time the student graduates and get on industry, if I'm teaching something old, they're never going to get a job, and they're going to want to blame me, which is fine. Why not? But I want to at least give them the opportunity that they could have had that job if they put in the effort.
Hey, Jason, if I could make a comment that I find kind of interesting in the college world, when you have classes that are developed and they go through that full process of who's going to develop them, they have to be approved, and the content that goes along with them. And it takes so much time for that to finally come out as a course that they're going to use. And then the problem becomes of how much money was invested in doing that as to how long the course stays active. And sometimes I see how things are kind of behind times, and it's students that go through the behind times and they get out into the field's beyond where the college is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And that's why I say I kind of break the rules when it comes to that. One of those that I break the rules and I'm not going to be able to do it for much longer. If you notice these course numbers, a lot of them are the same. And that's because those are generally topics that we were trying out. And they are technically only supposed to be on the books like that for about a year. And then we should be coming with full course numbers for those. Unfortunately, they've been taught for an endless amount of time for that. And now the state of Kansas is even having us change what those numbers represent. So I'm in the process of actually getting these finalized. But what we tend to do, and it's really hard at the grad level, I'm not as worried about it. But if you read our course catalog, they're very vague written courses. So we try not to write that we're doing Cisco. That's why the class is called Internet Working 1, right? That if we needed to forklift out the content, we could, as long as we're still teaching those core concepts. And so all my courses are written with that fashion in the course catalog, that if a vendor is out and we need to forklift it out with a different curriculum, that we could do that if we chose to do so. Yes, technically, if there's a major change, we're supposed to send that back through the process. But it's interesting; those rules and procedures change yearly, and it takes over a year and a half to get something through those programs, right? Which is why I'm always envious of high schools and community colleges, because they're so much easier to flex and shift, from what I've seen over the years, because they don't have those tight restrictions like that.
You should be at a community college in New York State.
Yep.
With general education and all the different things that are coming our way.
Yeah, and I that to me is the downside, because man, those 2 years had so much flexibility, and I couldn't state it more and more, even from the university side, is that there was way more knowledge in those 2 years than was ever coming out of the university side.
Well, 20 years ago, they put Gen Ed on us, which was 12 different categories. And then they turned around and limited the number of credit hours. It had to be under 64, which is fine. But a lot of times getting all the English and math and all the other stuff in, which is fine, but getting all the histories and all that stuff in and trying to do a ton of technical stuff, just hard to do under 64 credits.
I got it. And that they recently changed ours where, we have this 120-hour degree, right? But they only have to take, what is it, 34 hours now of general ed?
Yeah.
When I was going through, there was like 60 and more of those. And now you can get two degrees essentially just by using your electives as a second degree.
Yeah, 30 of our hours have to be in what's called general education, and it's everything from civil discourse to liberal arts stuff to whatever. 30 hours of a associate's degree is pure gen ed.
And that's usually what we see here is, so your associates will be able to transfer that in, all the gen ed credits. That is one thing that they did nicely, is it does go across the statewide system. So if they finish their associates over there, they're basically 3/4 of the way done. Coming in with their bachelor's, they just have to take the core and a few electives.
Can y'all guys hear me now that I have a chance to jump in? George is the same way with the credit hours of gen ed and all. It transfers out pretty good.
Yeah, Tim, that's what always scares me, is the moment you have curriculum boards and they're the ones deciding what's going to be taught and what's not going to be taught. From the technical side, that is almost a death stroke in order to make sure that you're never going to be on top of it and teach the latest.
Well, and one of the things that happen here is our community colleges are independent of the state system. We are our own entities.
Yeah.
But the chancellor said the 4-year units, which are directly run by the state, had to do gen ed. And they said, and then they looked at us and said, well, you're not transferring students to us without gen ed. And we have to get 30 hours in the first 64 hours, where the 4-year schools get their 30 hours in over a 4-year window.
Like you said, and in the associates realm, you only get them for what, 3-4 classes, about all you can get out of them besides that?
I think in the IT program we've got about 8 or so technical courses. They take almost everything we've got technical.
Okay.
But it's tight. It's very tight. And if we added anything more technical into it, we would be in trouble with not having enough liberal arts stuff and gen ed.
Gotcha.
It is what it is.
Yeah. And of course, we're all being attacked. At some point, it's what does the college education really pay for now, right? And I hear that, and I know it's grumblings forever. And this education cliff, or this student cliff that we're supposed to be fearing for the last 20 years, they say it's still coming, and I'm not sure what's going to happen. But I explain that to my students in that way, especially in the IT field. It's really hard for a lot of them to justify getting a bachelor's degree, or especially a master's degree, when IT doesn't care. They really don't care. They don't care whether you have the bachelor's or the IT. They want to know if you have the skills. They don't care what your GPA was. I can't ever say that any employer has ever cared whether or not you had a high GPA or not. But what they care is whether or not you can actually do the work, or they have somebody they can train. That's really what I've seen.
We had a conversation with a lady who was from one of the four-year schools, and one of the things they were saying, you know, because we were talking about certifications versus degree versus both versus 4-year, and one of the things that she had cited some research or some data that said that the interesting thing wasn't getting in the door. The question was, what were they going to be 5, 10, 15 years down the road? Where were they going to plateau? If they came in with only certifications, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way in any way, shape, or form, but if they came in with certifications, they would plateau earlier than if they came in with a degree or a degree and some certifications. And then if it was a 4-year degree, they plateaued farther out. That it just seemed like there was a ceiling kind of in there. And the issue is, you know, whether or not someone's going to stay in the field. I mean, if I got into cyber today, I'm a 60-year-old man. If I got into cyber today, which would be a challenge, right? Would I still be doing it in 5, 10, 15 years with all the change and all the differences and all the things? You know, the people on the ground, how long are they? You know, not everybody can move up, move up, move up, move up. Otherwise, there's nobody to do any work.
Right. No, I hear you. And that's usually the way I try to explain it to my students coming in with a bachelor's, and I'm explaining to them that it's not your degree that you're here to do. If you really want to get the most out of the tuition you guys are paying, it's going to be building up the relationships with your fellow students. It's the relationships you're building with employers when you travel and go to these opportunities. Because to me, that was the biggest thing I got out of my bachelor's. Yes, I learned the knowledge and the things in there, but I built a Rolodex. I learned a lot of my alumni and my friends and the guys I grew up with and contacts out in industry. And so when I graduated, if I needed something, I just called them. And by the end of the day, I think I calculated the other day, I've hired 6 of the people I went to college with. Because they were masters in these little areas that I needed that niche for. They were ready to leave their company, and we got them hired in.
Yeah, the skill set. I mean, you're talking to a guy who started in punched cards.
Yeah.
And programming for me was punched cards, COBOL, Fortran type stuff. And now it's, you know, object oriented, it's client server, it's scripting, it's the databases. You know, we didn't even have databases. That it's the ability to grow and change, and that's a really tough thing to sell to somebody who's 18 years old. They just, it's hard to I look back over the 36 years I've been doing this, and the amount of change is unbelievable. But you don't see that in the beginning. It's just hard to see that growth over time.
I hear you. And it's hard on both as an educator and it's hard as an adult, or even as a parent, rather. So that was that was the main reason I came back to teach. Was at that point in time, if I came back and taught right now, where my son just started college this fall, been here for 7 years, that he would get full ride tuition if I started at that point in time.
Nice.
And that was a big deal, right? I mean,
yeah,
I didn't want to pay that kind of thing out, right? But
right.
Now that I'm here, one, things have changed where you only have to, well, you get full ride tuition from the day you show up as a staff member, your family does. But they had to do that because they got to get people to come work here, right? We're in the middle of Kansas. So
yeah,
it was a great shift, but it really changed my outlook at what I did. But now that he's here, you know, I don't care if it's recorded, I had to look him in the eyes and say, look, man, you don't have to come to the university. I would love, no matter what, I would like you to get a degree of something, if at all possible. It's free. That's why I came here.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we have the partnerships with the 2 years, if you really love to go do some technical stuff,
yeah,
those jobs are blowing up just like everything else around here. So don't feel like you got to go get that 4-year degree because I'm here. Because, man, I could, in a different world, I would have done a totally different 2-year track and learned the rest that I need to learn and still excelled. So. We're definitely getting into the philosophy, so we're winding down in the last 15 minutes. And my poor little snowman is almost done, so I know we're getting close here.
Sounds pretty good to me.
He's not that little.
No, this one was the big one. He's what, 220 millimeters high, something like that. So about maxed out the machine.
Wow.
I have a question.
Yes.
Show us.
Oh, the snowman? Yeah, he's there. So the camera, this one got a little blurry on me, but he's got some buttons in here. I wonder why they got so. Oh, I know why we had to move him because the camera was pointing. I'm used to printing stuff only about this tall, and it's out of focus. That's why it looks like that. So he's almost there though. He's got a little button on the top of his hat, and then he'll be good to go.
So this was a little off topic from the snowman, but so you mentioned your cyber club. We have a
Yes.
cyber club also. And my question, how do you get them more involved or interested and continuing to come to the meetings? Are you having that same struggle also? Like I know you said you start out with sometimes you start out with like 20, 24 people and then end up with like 15 by the end of the semester. So
Yeah,
how do
that's
you really try to keep them involved?
absolutely. That's a really good one, and that it's always a struggle because our numbers decline so bad towards the end of the semester, and then we get a resurgence at at the start of the next one. So what we've done early on, of course, what I was doing was almost treating it like another class that they didn't pay for. They just got a bunch of knowledge. But I didn't really like that because it became me teaching and them not learning organically. So they've gone to where, some of the grad students will come in and help them learn extra topics that they're doing. Having things like the National Cyber League competitions that they can look forward to and train for. Um, Really, the latest ones is getting involved with community. So we have a new STEM building that came in down here downtown for kids. And these guys will put together a workshop for kids that they go down and do 1 or 2 weekends out of the semester. And that seems to be building because they see the advantage of that. And they didn't get those kind of opportunities. And so a large portion of them really enjoy that. Fundraising is another one. And fundraising is always hard, right? So what do a bunch of cyber guys do for fundraising because they can't go hack something? We're fortunate enough here. We have a German festival in the fall, Oktoberfest, and early on we were able to capitalize on making brats. So my catering background came in when I came here, and I was able to get the students to help me make brats from scratch, and we sell and they raise about they're doing pretty good, about 3 to 4 thousand a year, and then they take that money and that's what we use to go on trips to KC and Denver and stuff like that. But keeping them involved, whether it's on the technical side or the non-technical. I won't say that we don't struggle each week to get students to show up. Like I said, we sometimes break down and end up going every other week, but we tend to go on Tuesdays and help that out. Does that help at all? But the answer is yes. I run into that same thing.
Yeah, that's helpful.
What they really get excited about is like those CTFs, right? So if you're challenging them on the skills and you turn it into a game, that's really when they start spending time on it and they don't even realize they're doing it. And really trying to showcase them. So us as a department, we brag quite a bit on that student organization, and that makes them feel better and they want to stay more involved there. The biggest thing I've done as a professor is when employers come to me and ask, hey, you got anybody that would fit this role? And I get that a lot. We have a really good alumni network for that. I go to the student club first. So if you're not part of the student club, I'm sorry, but you're probably not a very outgoing student, or you didn't want to dedicate that extra time to hone those skills. That obviously doesn't work for every student, right? You've got some of those that have full-time jobs and they're working their way through and they can't. But I typically go with that student club first and offer those opportunities to them and hand select students out of there.
Okay, cool. I was thinking more of a project wise, so like a 3-part project, because when you have someone that you feel like depending on you, say you got one person that's doing the software, got another person doing maybe a website or uh, another project in the club. I was thinking that would kind of give them some kind of camaraderie that they can actually depend on each other to get the total project completed. So idea like that may entice them to come back because they know they have someone that is dependent on them to do the project. So something like that may help.
It does, and that we do something similar where we have a small server farm that just the club pretty much runs, and we give them a public IP address, and so they learn how to stand up those services that they would normally host at home. We give them the bandwidth and the ability to do that from here, as long as they're doing legal activities and not illegal activities. Um, and that tends to work out because you're right. It does give them that share of responsibility and that sense of working to try to put things together. Um, that's to me one of the biggest things like I talked about was those CTFs and getting involved in those. But that's really my goal is to try to get some of these challenges out and keep these connections with folks like yourself so that when I have a challenge out there, we can post it on something like that Discord. And even if your students don't have any skills, but we have an entry level one, we want to just give them the opportunity to go through it. And maybe we stick one of our people on one of those teams. So say you have 3 teams available of 3 people, that we stick one of our guys on there to try to help that if it's one of ours, or if they're incoming freshmen on our side, we just mix them all together and see what everybody can do. It's not really a your school versus our school. That's not what I'm interested at all. I'm interested in just getting them to communicate with even people they don't know. Because those, once again, those connections, those skills, that Rolodex, I think my students hate that word because I use it all the time. But if they would build their Rolodex, that would greatly help them in the future.
Awesome, sounds good.
And even a Rolodex is a little before my time, but I got introduced to a couple of them on some internships. So I got fortunate my freshman year. I was given an internship in Chicago, and my entire job at one point, I was able to convince them that I could sit on the beach and feed business cards into a system out of their Rolodex and categorize it so that they would be more organized. And they fell for it. They thought it was a good idea. I just didn't tell them I was at the beach doing it. Over the Wire is a good set. Yeah, Onezimo. That's a really good product. It's been a long time since I've used them, but yeah, the students really use that. They brought that up themselves. So with those little clubs, the best thing I can say is see if you can find some old hardware around, whether alumni want to donate it or the IT is discounting something. It's a great platform. Throw Proxmox on it. Proxmox has really changed the game in that ground. If you can get Proxmox installed and they can run maybe 1 or 2 little virtual machines or a slew of handful of those Docker containers, if they can learn those sysop skills like what you guys have learned pretty much this week, they will be entirely way more marketable out in the industry because I've got seniors in my grad program or in my undergrad program that don't have a clue how to do that stuff. Even though we try to talk to them and try to explain it, I'm even getting the computer networking program to really revamp as to what they teach. In other words, we no longer need to teach the theory of TCP. They need to know the concept, but we don't need to teach the bits on the wire anymore. Like, I'm sorry, that kind of stuff is sailed. We know it's there. They should have a little bit, but why don't we teach them to do a little bit of system administration? Let's teach them this sysops, and in this case, how to deploy a Docker container to monitor the network that they know how to build now. Those are really where the jobs are at. Nobody is just a pure network engineer anymore. Doesn't exist. So hopefully you can get those kind of skills out. And like I said, today you can do that relatively cheaply.
You got my attention.
I was actually reading an article during lunch where somebody had deployed it on an N100. And if you're not familiar with that Intel proc, it's a very tiny, very low power Celeron. But it ran Proxmox great. And with a little bit of like 8 gig of RAM, he was able to run a handful of virtual machines and then tiered them down, to where it was just 1 or maybe 2 virtual machines, but a lot of Docker containers. And he said it ran perfect. And I use those in my company for digital signage. You can pick them up for $100, if that, off Amazon. And it's a great way for them to do that. Yep, no problem. I know we're getting up on the time here, so I thank everybody for being here. If you have questions or I missed materials, by all means, reach out to me. I'm definitely going to leave this website up and running for quite a while. I'll work on getting those labs to a single package or a URL, so that if you do choose to use something, let me know. And if you do use something in the classroom, let me know. I'd be happy to tweak it to make it work for you, that kind of thing. Not a problem.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I'm going to rebuild that server tomorrow and get started on it. And next week, on Monday and Tuesday, I'll be in the office, so I'm going to see what I can get going.
Great, great. I'll pretty much be in the office even over break here. So if you shoot me an email, I'll more than likely catch it. No problem. Again, I thank everybody for coming, and definitely just do me one favor and let Mark, when he gives that feedback, let him know what you like and what you didn't like. If there was pieces you don't like, by all means, let him know, because I welcome all feedback, good and bad, so I can fix them and do them better next time.
Well, for me personally, it's been one of the best ones I've been in.
I greatly appreciate that.
Hey, Jason, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree absolutely with what he was saying. This was a phenomenal place to be. I find it very interesting on the things that that you've taught and the way you've taught it, and I really agree with how it is the hands-on and what you were saying. I see such a difference in that between being book smart, so to speak. The hands-on, it's just thank you very much.
Not a problem. I appreciate that very much.
Hey, Jason, I just had a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you mentioned the cyber range, and I was curious if you were referring to one of your universities out there that has an IBM cyber range.
No, the one that we have is actually, it's called Enterprise KC. And it was a KC Kansas initiative where they gave, I don't know, it was like $10 million to build this cyber range, among other
Okay.
things out there. And I don't know, am I still recording?